Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith along with
Vaughn Ozerets.
Podcast episode 239. We have a regular from North Dakota, Dave Anderson, and we have a great guest also from North Dakota. Welcome, David Geatz. What do you have to say, David Geatz?
Well, it worked in junior high school when I want to go on a date and you say no, I say, hey, come on, you got to go. Whatever David wants, David gets. So it was kind of a good thing in junior high, and then it kind of didn't work anymore after that.
I thought your wife fell for that though, right?
She did, yeah.
I remember you told me you were at a restaurant and you started chatting her up, and she said, "Excuse me, I'm on a date." She
was level-eared. She was going to get married, and I just thought she was the prettiest girl there and persistent. Just like tennis, you just don't give up, Steve. It's that second effort.
Well, we're on your wife. Tell her tell our listeners, it's great to have you on. You have a PhD, and tell our listeners what she thinks of you having a PhD.
She told me when I got a PhD, she said, the fact you got a doctorate just diminishes that degree in my eyes for everybody else. And I thought about it for a minute, and I said, I was kind of pissed, and I said, God, she's right though, actually. So, yeah. So anyway, she keeps me honest.
Oh, that's great. I've done some homework. Everybody talks about the winters being so bad in North Dakota, colder than cold. Tornadoes, you average 32 tornadoes per year, but it's so hot, humid, windy. It's filled with bugs. With North Dakota, I've got so many notes here. With
you're hitting our strong point.
400.
You haven't hit on the weak point.
420 types of birds. 87 types of mammals. At Anderson's wedding, there was 9 types of mammals from North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys were not human. With 1,126 types of insects. Here's a good one for if you're the outdoors guy. You go fishing, right, Coach Geatz? 98 types of fish.
Yeah.
Here's another thing about North Dakota. This is a good line for a comedian. The only thing most Americans know about North Dakota is that it's above South Dakota. When I met Anderson in the 80s, one of the Charlie's Angels was Cheryl Ladd from South Dakota. I used to say, South Dakota's got Cheryl Ladd, North Dakota's got nothing. But
Lawrence Welk. We had Lawrence Welk.
Right. We got Lawrence Welk.
Oh, that's right.
And we have Roger Maris.
Roger Maris, his billboard. And we had Darren Earnhardt, the great baseball player.
North Dakota's got a lot of strikes against it in terms of weather and giant mosquitoes and humid and hot and everything. But when I was a kid, I wouldn't have traded my growing up experience for anything in Grand Forks. I loved it. Rode my bike everywhere. It was great. But what was your feeling about that, Dave? Do you have the same experience? Because now when I look back on it, I think, I shouldn't say this. There might be North Dakota people listening, but if you want to pick one of the 5 worst states to live, I think North Dakota makes the top 5.
Yeah. It's hard to describe. And like you, we didn't know any different. So many people in North Dakota at that time they hadn't traveled much outside of it. You maybe went to Minnesota. Minneapolis was like going to Europe.
Yeah.
But it was a very kind of almost forgotten about life. Kids recreated outside till way, way into the night. And it was, the winters you just dealt with. But, looking back, I took my wife there the first time, to meet my parents, and, Minot didn't have the oil boom yet. So the airport, you had to get off this little puddle jumper that you took from Minneapolis and then run into the actual airport from outside. And we got there on a winter day right around Christmas, and it was 78 below wind chill. And my wife, when we got inside, she looked at me and she said, I just want you to know there's absolutely no way I'm moving here. It's so cold in the winter for so long.
No, it's hard to describe. You know what? You remember when your teeth would hurt, your teeth would get cold, and you remember you couldn't breathe. If you took a deep breath in when it was cold, it was just like your lungs would hurt. You couldn't breathe through your nose at all. It was, you walk around the corner of a building and that wind would hit you and it would just take your breath away. People, it's a cold that you can't really describe.
Yeah, it was something. But I like you. My memories of being there as a kid are great.
Loved it. Yep,
Yeah, I couldn't wait to get out though. Literally couldn't wait to get out of there.
It was me too, and I couldn't wait to get out. And I thought, God, I just would not want. I wouldn't want to move back. I love my experience there, but it would be one of the states I wouldn't choose. I don't know what other state might be in the top 5 worst, but that's got to be at least consideration, I think.
That might be a top 3.
When you get on YouTube, you can actually look at clips. 10 reasons to move to North Dakota, 10 reasons not to move to North Dakota. To digress with Dave's wife, Jen, I one time said, Jenna Anderson is the only person I know who's not from North Dakota who's been to North Dakota. And that wasn't really true because I met a lot of people through ice hockey. But here's some more things with still less than 800,000 total population. Wyoming, Alaska, and Vermont have more people. This is sad. Only 40% of Americans can find North Dakota on the map. Landlocked, no oceanfront property. With, you guys are so Canadian, bordered by Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Minnesota, and South Dakota. Bismarck's the capital.
Yeah.
Fargo's the largest city. With, So, Coach Geatz, we usually start by asking our guests what you had for breakfast, but tell us about your tennis start. It was late.
Okay, I'm gonna make it brief because you told me I could get to flip the script, the script here, and I could interview you guys. And so my wife and I, it's a kind of a dumb story, but my wife and I and one of my wife's best friends they wanted to play this little game. So the game was, let's each discuss what everybody's superpower is. And so my wife's superpower was just really friendly, and she makes people feel at ease. And my wife's friend's superpower, I was determined that she was so bubbly and so charismatic and had such a great personality. So I kind of couldn't wait. And I said, okay, what's my superpower? And then my wife says, well, David's superpower is he has the ability to turn every conversation to something about him. And I said, okay, this is a stupid game. I'm not playing this anymore. So anyway, I started kind of late. Yeah, I started like 14 years old, but I played a lot. I was going to ask Dave, could you play a lot? For 5 months of the year, I played a lot of tennis, but you couldn't play after that. There's no indoor courts when I was growing up. And maybe you had indoor courts in Minot. I don't know. Did you?
Yeah, we got really lucky because, in the tennis boom, even before, a really wealthy doctor from Boston, they used to pay the doctors school bills and give them big bonuses to end up in Minot just to try to recruit doctors. They, wipe out all their medical bills, everything, or their medical school bills. Yep. And this guy moved up there, and he was a tennis fanatic from Boston, Dr. Cameron. And I lived on the north side of the town, which was not really the wealthy side, but he bought land out there, and about 1.5 miles from my house, he built an indoor tennis club, 4 courts. And you remember like Sean Miller and Matke and some of those guys, they'd come through and for work. And so I got to hit with some and then the Air Force Base was right there. And I know they have a big one in Grand Forks as well. And so I never had a period, and I worked feeding balls from very, very young age. I just do anything around the club, sweep courts, do anything to pay the bill for court time. So between the indoor court being built at exactly the right time for me, and then the gyms. I was telling that to the kids here because in Texas we don't even have basements, but every school up there had fallout shelters because all of the nukes that America stored were right around the Minot Air Force Base.
We were the largest nuclear power in the world was North Dakota.
Yeah, I mean, it was, if you watch the movie War Games, Grand Forks, Minot are going to get hit first. And So everything had fallout shelters, which was just this huge area underneath each school that had cement walls. So I hit a ball a lot, even during basketball season. I mean, I'd get up there at the school and hit the wall, and yeah, so I got pretty lucky in that way. I hit whenever I could, and even during other sports. And but the indoor court kind of saved me. And I think Skogerbos didn't build yours until right after that.
Right after I left, I already left town, but
yeah,
I just I was listening to a conversation with Chuck and talking about the internet and destroying. The internet's the thief of dreams. It kills people's dreams and goals because when we were kids, I wanted to be a pro tennis player. I had no clue how hard it was, how impossible it was. I just didn't know anything. And so that's why I worked hard at it. I hit a lot of balls and I worked hard and I thought I could do it. But I'm 14 years old when I start and I don't have a coach at all. And there's no indoor courts. I can only play 5-6 months of the year max. Want to come down to it, I really had no chance. And yeah. I think maybe it was Steve that told me this, or Chuck Creasy maybe, but they told me that, or maybe it was a Penn psychologist that told me this, that you really need 3 things in life to succeed. And the 3 things that you need in life to succeed are you need opportunity. If you grow up in Alaska and there's no indoor courts, you're not going to be good. And you need ability, which is maybe it's God-given or maybe it's a genetic thing or whatever. You believe in ability. But the other thing that you need is desire. And I don't think I had much opportunity. I had a ton of desire. And I think if you're going to be great in anything, I think you need all 3 of those things. They all have to align. I don't care if it's tennis or whatever. It's really hard to be good without good opportunity. And it is impossible to be good without great desire. And I think you can still be pretty damn good without just unbelievable ability. But with the desire and opportunity, you can get to be a good tennis player.
I like how you break that down and have rate people from, or rate your opportunity from 1 to 10.
Yep.
And it's just amazing. When you start reading the backstories. Let me read this about Teddy Roosevelt, who jump ahead. I mean, I read that when he was 11 and he had asthma, they sent him to North Dakota. But then I read where that wasn't true. I read where his mother and his wife died on the same day, and he bought a ranch. He ended up going from New York, and there's so many stories about Teddy Roosevelt. I'll read these 2 quotes from Teddy, then I'll ask the 2 of you a question. I would have never been president if I wasn't for my experiences in North Dakota. I would have never been president if it wasn't for my experiences in North Dakota. And the next one is fantastic. They took the snob out of me. So, you obviously it was in a lot of ways now, a tough place to grow up, the weather and this and that and the other thing. But both of you as coaches, if you could take some of the players, and everyone has potential, don't like that word like so many coaches, but if you could take some of the players that you've coached over time and they could go and survive, say, 2 years of what you faced as a kid, don't you think North Dakota would be a great place to send tennis players? Coach Geatz, what do you think?
Yes, I do, but you'd have to be unbelievable at marketing to do it.
Yeah, right.
What you're proposing, it couldn't be done. It's nobody. I shouldn't say it couldn't be done, but my God, it'd be hard to sell kids on the fact. Let's go to North Dakota and eat a wind chill in January. If you could do that, I almost think one of the maybe one of your weaknesses as an instructor might be the fact that I don't know if you're a good enough self-promoter. You've got all kinds of knowledge, more than anybody, and you've got fact-based stuff, and you've got so much information you can give out. And I hear so much BS, and the only thing that they've got going is they're just better marketers and self-promoters than you are. I don't know. What do you think of that? Bad theory on my part?
Coach Anderson, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your first question about, I think it'd do everybody an incredible amount of good to have to, I believe in suffering and sacrifice, to make greatness, even if you have opportunity, ability, desire. So I think that and the challenges that come with that living in that kind of environment would help build character, the character of a champion, for sure. I think that right in my hometown, about 3 blocks from my mom growing up in the Depression era, was Dale Brown, who went on to be a legendary coach.
In basketball, right?
Yeah, LSU, Shaq in that era. And he was, and then just out 2 hours to the west of us where the oil boom would hit, that's where Phil Jackson, had his upbringing and, became a legendary, one of the greatest coaches in the NBA as far as record, for sure. And so I think adversity forms people, and, you almost have to have it. And so it's every place that we train tennis players in, whether it's Boca or Dallas or wherever we are or anywhere, it doesn't matter. It's more difficult to provide adversity. So we have to be creative in ways to find a North Dakota feel, through the course of the week for people. And, because we are in an era where a kid hasn't ever rolled right a court, where Dave, I know you have, and I have too. We've shoveled snow off a court to hit. And, but here they won't roll dry a court.
Coach Geatz, let me ask you, you want to, before you got on the air, you and Dave were exchanging all these names. It obviously shows the passion going back decades. So many of the same people, but you win high school state championships. Then you get to go to Kalamazoo, and tell us about that story. You didn't have the money to go to Kalamazoo. Were you born in 1952?
I was born in 57, and I went to
57.
Kalamazoo, and I never. I think I won our sectionals, and I qualified to go to Kalamazoo in the 18s because they took the guy who won sectionals got to go. And so everybody's asked me, so when you're going to make arrangements to go to Kalamazoo? I said, I don't know, what's Kalamazoo? And it's the boys 18 nationals. I said, no, I'm not going to go. I don't have any money. How am I going to get to Kalamazoo? Don't have a car and don't have any money. And my dad and mom certainly didn't have any money to send me. So I said, I'm not going. So the northern section found out I wasn't going to go, and they got together and they raised some money and they gave me a plane ticket and they paid for my dorms there. And I flew out to Kalamazoo and I got to play. And I lost first. I took the Triple Crown, but the coach in Mexico saw me play and he gave me a scholarship. And so I didn't have to pay anything to go to college. And so I thought, wow, that was really, I always thought, I owe tennis. I think about that, and that was a game changer for me. I owe tennis. I owe them a lot. I owe the game a lot. And so, that was my story. I went to the dorms. I lost first round in singles. I think I played a guy who was 16th seed and lost first round in doubles and first round of the consolation. But I got to make it, and it just inspired me more to see that level, see what you have to do. I had no idea what the level was. And then you see that level and you learn a lot. So
when you went, I thought you were a little bit older, 52. That's the Jimmy Connors, Brian Gottfried, Harold Solomon, Dick Stockton, and on, Roscoe Tanner.
When I was the tennis coach at the University of Minnesota, I also ran the Northwest Sectionals, and I had a good friend at American Airlines, and he gave me like 20 free tickets. And so I would give the winner of each, if you won your age group, I would give the winner a round trip airline ticket to Kalamazoo to pay their expenses. I mean, most of the kids didn't need it, but I felt like, it's the least I could do to give back. I mean, tennis gave me a college education. I met my wife through tennis. I kind of traveled the world through tennis, and I made a living through tennis. And now my kid makes a living through tennis. So I owe the game a lot.
No, that's great. How about some of the kids from your childhood, the Wins and Rick Dowling? I see these names. You're still in touch with all those guys, I bet, huh?
Oh yeah, those guys are lifelong friends. I don't know what's that. Yeah, they were teammates in high school. My college teammates. What's that old saying? Something about like some people you have friends for a reason, friends for a season, and you got friends for a lifetime. And those guys are just lifetime friends. Like the kind of guys you wouldn't see them for 20 years. You call them, say, I'm in town. I'm staying over at your place tonight. And it'd be like you hadn't missed a beat. And I think that's what tennis gives you. I think I hear you guys talk about college tennis. If you have the opportunity to play, my God, you should play. I don't remember my physics class or my history professor, but what I do remember is those road trips and my teammates and competing together. That was the greatest part of my college experience, the most memorable part. And I bet you most of the people that played on the team would say that. So,
yeah, with our listeners before college tennis, I mean, you played and then went to Europe and you had coached 37 years. I have down. Red River High, Red and Black, Rough Riders. Did you play other sports besides tennis?
yeah, but we all did. You know what? It was just like when you grew up, you couldn't play tennis in the winter. Everybody played. My dad froze a rink in the backyard and he played hockey. And in the summer, we go, just play pickup baseball in the park and we play, if it was football season, you play football and you just played every sport. It's kind of what I'm sure you all have the same experience. Whatever was in season is what you played. And it wasn't a lot of organized stuff like you guys are talking about. It was back then, you just go down to the park and a bunch of your buddies are there and a few more show up and you just get a game going.
And New Mexico, scholarship, David Ocho, is he on your team?
Oh my God, you did your research. Yeah, I talk to Dave all the time. Dave and I went over to Europe. I got out of college and I still wanted to be a pro. I still didn't know how tough it was. And I played for 2 years. And after 2 years, I was married and I came to the realization, you know what? It's tough. I'm just not good enough. I'm just not good enough. And there's a new crop of 17 or 18-year-olds coming up. And it's kind of like you get sucked into the dream a little bit because, I don't know, I think I won 90 matches in a row in high school. I won the state tournament 3 years in a row. And when I was a senior in high school, I won the state men's. And so I was succeeding and I got to college and I was a good college player and I was succeeding at the college level. We played Kevin Curran at the NCAAs and I see he's in the finals. So I just kept thinking that I was going to make the next jump. And so I tried to make the next jump and I realized for a fairly short time into it that, you know what? It's not good enough. I practiced hard enough. I just had too many holes in my game. And, I was serious when I said, I wish I would have had guys like you when I was a coach. I think if I could have started younger and I would have had somebody that could just give me a good base and solid fundamentals, that I think maybe I could have played. But, probably not. Probably I was never going to be good enough. Who knows? But
Kevin Curran, let's stop on that for a second. I tell that story all the time because Curran got to the NCAA finals with a two-handed forehand and he got to the Wimbledon final with a one-handed forehand. What's your memory of playing Kevin Curran?
I remember that he was the number one seed in the NCAA tournament, and I played him first round. And I remember I was up 4-1 the first set, and he was choking his brains out. He was so tight. And then they had a thunderstorm, and the thunderstorm came over, and we came back an hour and a half later and played, and he kicked my butt. Somehow he just kind of loosened up. But I don't remember his service it was good, but I don't remember, wow, this is Galen Allen from Fargo, North Dakota. I thought I had a better.
With I remember in '85, I was fortunate enough to be with the U.S. Davis Cup team in Germany, and Becker had just won Wimbledon. And Bollettieri was fun to be around. People pick on the late Nick. He really wasn't big on the X's and O's and the nuts and bolts, but he could get people to walk on water. But what he said about that match, because Curran had beaten McEnroe and Connors to get to the finals. And he just, with swearing like a sailor, a paratrooper, I should say. He said that was over when they walked around the net post and Boris Becker he just kept strutting and Curran had to stop and get out of Curran's way. But no, I mean, he ended up obviously being a great player.
Was Becker 18 when he won it or 17?
Yeah, he was 17 years old.
Mm-hmm. When you don't know any better. I mean, I was fearless when I was 17. I was a complete idiot. I would do anything. I think that the youth, I don't know. I think Becker was just like that, just fearless at 17. Think about when you were 17. You didn't start nervous till getting later, I don't think.
With flipping the script here, but let's keep going. Electrical engineer, and then you decided with your opportunity to want to pursue coaching. Then you became the coach in New Mexico. How'd that go?
Oh, it went good, but I'm ready to ask you some questions. I've got like about 15 minutes of good material, then I'm kind of done with myself about it. Socially too. I can carry a good conversation for about 10 minutes. I can be kind of engaging, and then I'm through. Hey, I got a couple of questions I was really curious to ask you guys about. It seems to me the game changes every 10 years or so. It looks like they're just bigger and they're better, and the ball's different. The Durban volley went away and it became baseline. What do you see the next 10 years? What do you see the big change that's going to come in the future? But pull out your Nostradamus ball and what do you think is going to happen? Durban volley coming back?
Go ahead, Coach Anderson.
Well, I mean, the athletes coming into the sport it's gone vertical for sure. Some of the, I've hit balls out at Indian Wells and you feel like you could swing 3 times before you actually hit it because the court was so gritty and slow. Yeah. But I think, that there's a limit to the ball speed. I think that, when Alcaraz was, plugging through about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I was thinking that might sway a lot of people to start looking at playing a little bit more all over the court, but doesn't seem to have influenced it too much. It could carry on with this trend for a while. I think that it's amazing to me because, when you see people coil with the racket head and the racket head tip of the racket's facing the opponent, I think the influence that this generation and, from the early on look that Dominique Thiem had, I think that, back 10, 15 years ago, it swayed tennis in this direction. I would hope people start playing more all over the court. But I think that we're going to have to make some changes on the court surfaces and things like that in order to see a little bit more of a contrast in styles. And that's going to be decided at levels of bureaucracy that we don't work at. But it's sad, Dave, to me because I went down and watched the ITA indoors at SMU this year, and great event, team event, and you were hard pressed to find a doubles player serving and going forward. The 16 best teams in America. I mean, there were some, but I watched A&M and UT play, and nobody on the 3 doubles courts were going forward. Not even on the second ball. They just weren't looking to.
Craig O'Shaughnessy has all these stats, and Steve has some of the same stats about the odds of winning a point are greatly increased if you're at the net. Players know that intuitively, but still, why don't they come in?
Going back to the question 10 years down the road, Coach K, can anybody pronounce his last name? Krzyzewski?
Yeah.
With, the athletes are better in the sense that they're bigger, stronger, but they're not tougher. That was one thing. The other thing also, too, is multiple sports. But I think it comes down to parenting and it comes down to society. It comes down to coaching. I think tennis in this country has become a business. I don't think it's a sport so much. I think it has major, major problems as far as how it's managed, how it's packaged. Kids in America were getting better. When they just took one private lesson a week. This is especially at the lower levels. I mean, granted, at the very top, the equipment, it's like a pole vaulter. Years ago, they were using a bamboo pole. So the technology is changing in many, many ways. But I think at the lower levels, like what's going on with high school tennis and pickleball invading the sport, I think tennis is in trouble. And it's like when the basketball, the dream team, they won, and people say, well, no one could ever compete with the Americans in basketball. Well, it's a public school sport, it's a major sport, but I know nothing about basketball, but told in other parts of the world that basketball is still coached with fundamentals. And and someone is 6'4" and serving, and they're going to be in the tiebreakers. So I think that the size is a factor. the little guy, the little gal can play, but I think like this in baseball, they should modify the equipment. They should bring tennis back into tennis because, and then again, Craig O'Shaughnessy certainly he's made an impact on the game. I'd like to have Bill Jacobson get the credit he's due for what he did back in the 80s with tennis analytics. But we always say with tennis analytics, people don't mention the math with grip, swing, body. But that's like the serve plus one, just that comment. That's what tennis is at the 12 and unders, and it really shouldn't be that way. It's like when, growing up in ice hockey, and it was by chance that Stan Mikita started playing with a curved hockey stick. Years ago, hockey sticks used to all be straight. And then what hockey did right away is said, no, kids still have to play with a straight stick. You can't play with a curve when you're a little kid because you got to learn to stick handle. You got to learn to have a backhand. And then also what hockey did is Boom Boom Jeffrey on comment came along and had a huge slap shot. And what they did in little kid hockey is you couldn't take slap shots until you got to a certain level. So I don't think tennis is united as much, but I think a big difference between ice hockey, and I understand that's become such an expensive sport now too, but hockey was volunteer driven. And I don't think many tennis coaches give back to the game and, just think, how can we help the game as a whole? And just instead of just catering to the clientele that we're dealing with. So I don't really think it's so much, it does come back to that, but, how the forehand's taught, but I think it comes down to the customer is the kid. Let's kill them with kindness. Let's give them what they want. Let's make it fun. I like one thing you say, I've got some notes down here, Coach Geatz. Kids compete and parents compare. Could you comment on that?
Oh, I learned that at the country club. I went to one of the wealthiest country clubs in the whole country, and I was a tennis director there. And what I found out is that the kids, they want to go and they want to compete, but almost invariably, when any parent came there, they one of the first questions that came up, oh, where's your kid go to school? And if you said University of Minnesota out east, it was like, kind of what went wrong there? Something, because it's so geared toward the Ivy League and the great academics and parents, that's the common question out there. Where's your kid go to school? And that's how they kind of judge you, and they're comparing. And I thought it was interesting to me. One thing he said about O'Shaughnessy, I had not an argument, but I had a little conversation with him about his 3 shots. What is it? 79% of the points or something are over in the first 3 shots. And so you should structure your whole practices around just the most important part. Why work on something that, but I kind of said, no, God, I don't think so. I think you better be able to hit 50 forehand cross courts in a row before you can make that one in a match that you need to count on. And so, but his feeling was like, what's your guys' feeling about changing your practices, knowing that the 3 shots, serve at forehand, serve plus 1, but whatever. What's your thought about changing practice? I still think old school work. Go out and hit your cross courts and hit your down the lines until you make 50 in a row. What do you guys think?
Coach Anderson, go.
Yeah, I lean towards your direction on it, Dave. I think that we as coaches, we want to build a whole game, and we want to kids may lean a little bit more towards one zone of the court. They may be more prone to being a counterpuncher, a baseliner, or versus a net rusher. But I believe we owe it to them to give them the whole game, so they so they can to use a basketball analogy, dribble with their left and right hand, and even though the serve plus 1 when your John Isner and almost 50% of your serves are unreturned, and the ones that are returned are hanging in the middle of the court. That definitely is a valid pattern or statement. But there's a lot of tennis played where that isn't the case.
One thing with Craig O'Shaughnessy, I remember having dinner with him and Warren Pretorius at U.S. Open. I remember Dave Fish wanted me to get together with a young Craig O'Shaughnessy years ago because, he was a whiz kid with a computer back in the day, and he's a very good writer. He's a great speaker. He's a personality. But in the end, and not taking anything away from him, when a guy can get on TV and help educate and I don't see him on TV as much. It was great when he's breaking through and saw him at Wimbledon and such. But he's a conference coach. I mean, is he a trench coach or is he a conference coach? And he's had some academies, and I'd like, okay, well, tell me the 8-year-olds that you've taught that became 12-year-olds and became 15-year-olds, and again, that circumstances come into that. People move, and and parents bop and shop, and how much time does someone actually have coaching someone for a number of years? I remember being at the University of Texas, and we had a reunion of sorts. And Dave, you were there, Dave Anderson, and we had 2 pads of paper. So put your name on the one that just write down the name of kids that you've taught for more than 5 years, and the other one is for write down names of kids that you've taught more than 10 years. Just last week, this guy, a comedian, Michael Costa, got a book coming out, Lucky Loser. And, we could talk to you about Craig Tiley. I know you won like 4 or 5 titles at Minnesota, then you were competing against Tiley.
Yeah.
Coach Geatz, with the training that Tiley had, Dave Anderson coming down from North Dakota. What we were doing in the 80s, and that's what we're trying to do through the GreatBase is, do people have a handle on Braden information? Then people laugh right in your face. I mean, like that was ancient history, but, physics is not a fad. So fact-based instruction, I mean, I think of Taylor Fritz and Kathy May. You'd have to ask Kathy. Taylor, when you went out on the court with your mom, were you just trying to rally the ball back and forth so many times? What's the name of your friend from your childhood, Yvonne?
Alex Mickelson.
Alex Mickelson. We did homework on his story. Yvonne knows him, but people got to learn to rally. And I love what you said, Coach, about I've heard coaches say this before, Coach Geatz, how many kids just go out on their own and hit half-hour cross courts one way, half-hour cross courts the other way. They're programmed out. And I think the parent ends up paying the burden. Say, for example, Dave Anderson runs a great program, and he's 400 plus people that he's worked with over the last 30 years gone on and played college tennis. It's kind of like if you can't beat him, you got to join him. I know Dave Anderson is told. I think you've been to Brookhaven, Coach Geatz, right? Didn't you?
Yes, I do. Billy Freer. I used to stay with him when I used to go for national indoors. I know Billy passed away, and I played Billy a couple times in some money.
I bet you played him at the WDAZ tournament.
Oh God, I did. I played Billy Freer. I partnered with Mark Brandenburg, and Billy was one heck of a competitor. I'll tell you that. He did not take losing kindly.
No, he didn't. Yeah, I figured you played him in Fargo at the WDAZ.
I just I have such a hard time. I listen to this. I listen to your guys' program, take a little grief here and there. It's old school, and everybody ends up with stiff strokes, and it's not the way it's done anymore. And there's the new modern Spanish method. And I always think to myself, but you're not really. You're this fact-based information, which is proven with slow motion video. It's not like you have some hypothesis of things work. I'm not going to argue ever that 2 + 2 = 4. It's just kind of a fact that I know. And especially, so maybe it's jealousy or they don't know any better, but I do hear some people take some shots at you guys. And I'm thinking, why? Tell me why you think that is. Jealousy, or they don't know better, or they just think you're old school, or old school works, especially when it's not based upon theory. What you guys do isn't based upon some hypothesis or a feeling or a great eye for tennis. It's just based upon what you said, physics, slow motion video. The modern forehand ain't so much different. There's a lot of commonalities between the modern forehand and the forehand that you guys taught a long time ago. I don't know. I just want to get your take on that.
Well, I'll turn it over to Dave Anderson, but I'll just say this quickly is racket head speed. Someone asked me one time, you're not teaching racket head speed. And I go, this kid is 7. And so go ahead, Dave Anderson.
Yeah. Well, in the debate, Dave, I mean, we hear it. I actually had this conversation this morning. I have a coach here great young coach, not young. He really is my right hand here, Andres Tejada from Venezuela.
Yeah.
And he said that his buddies all around the country, they think we have a deficiency in the way we teach the forehand. And a similar thing, right? And to what you're saying. And I think the biggest point of confusion with people is stage development, and they don't appreciate how long it takes. And also that if you're not willing, that you want to just build a great machine, and that might take a little bit of time, and, to try not to compromise on some things that you just know are going to be harmful to the player down the road. And so I think everybody, like Steve said, the attitude of the household these days, everybody wants their microwave, and they don't see what they think they see. I mean, the human eye isn't fast enough when you watch it on TV or watch it live in person. And if people were to actually just see side-by-side footage of Roger Federer and Bjorn Borg, which is available on YouTube, and just the similarities are mind-blowing. But I think that, it used to really eat me up, and now I don't let it bother me that much. And I just kind of try to keep going about our work. But it literally just came up this weekend. We have a young guy here, Mason Vaughn, and Steve sent here, and got him started on the right foot. And without that start, he wouldn't have ended up here, and then he wouldn't be doing what he did. And he'd just be, he's at the Brewers Cup in Mobile this weekend and beat the number one player in 18s. And there was some negative feedback on his forehand. And, it's a shame because you get a kid going down the road and then suddenly everybody wants to talk to him. And his forehand's in good shape, but it's just going to need more time, and he needs to be on over 130 pounds.
I know what you said is true. The eye doesn't see what the eye sees. Really, because I've been in tennis forever, my whole life. I'm just a tennis geek. I read every single book written on tennis, and I just wanted to learn. It was my sport, and I wanted to learn the history, everything about it. I still remember Bill Tilton's Match Play and the Spin of the Ball, one of the best tennis books I ever read. But that's about as old school as it gets.
Yeah.
But a perfect example of what you said, the eye doesn't see what really happens, is I was watching Nadal hit forehand in person. I thought, God, he just whipped that racket over his head with that buggy whip style way behind him. And then I watch in slow motion. My God, he hits all the way through the ball before that happens, which you can't see.
You don't see it track out.
Nope, you don't. And I've been watching tennis my whole life, and I should have a decent eye at it. If you do anything for 40 years and you try hard at it, you got to be pretty decent at the end of 40 years. And I didn't see it at all. I thought Nadal just short armed it. No, he hit through the ball. It has a great extension. It's just exactly what you guys say.
Let me just say this, so it's so misinterpreted. Of course, coming back to a lot of people just look at the content we have online. So well over 15 years, maybe 20 now, we've been giving out free content, but it is online. It's not the same as coming in person. I just did a clinic outside of Atlanta, and so I took 3 tennis balls, and all the kids can do it, and say, just take one ball, toss it up, and then just catch it with your palm. Then I like to give credit where credit's due. I mean, the first time I saw that done was with Vandermeer. Braden used to do something very similar. He would start class and say, okay, come up to the net and just drop a ball and just hit it over the net with your palm. So one thing that we've added to that, because of the craziness in tennis, because people want to just accelerate. They want to microwave tennis. They want to be good today, and they can't be good today. It just doesn't work that way. You're not going to be good at piano in 24 hours. So we just have people drop a ball, and they keep the wrist fixed, and they relax the swing up from their elbow, and they go over their shoulder and say, okay, that can turn into a topspin lob, off-pace passing shot. But this thing about the modern game, I mean, it just really comes down to, basics, repeat. But people don't understand the basics, and then they don't want to even repeat the basics. So
fundamentals are the fundamentals. It doesn't really change, I don't think.
Yeah, there's so many factors.
No.
I mean, when someone goes out and plays golf, they're playing against the course. We beat it into the ground. The scariest thing about tennis is you're comparing yourself to the person on the other side of the net. Dave just mentioned Mason Vaughn. One thing about that kid is he would run till he collapsed. You got to thank him first, thank his parents, his grandfather. It was great the first time they came. It was a 3-generation trip. And where's that come from? So that's desire that you were mentioning earlier. And ability, I don't think that he's going to be 6'5", but if he keeps doing the right things over and over again, and if you look at the history of tennis, and I love what you say about the internet being a dream killer, a thief of time, because it's just put your head down and work on fundamentals. And, again, it's just over and over again, people are trying to fast track it. Battle of Boca, I mean, people are out there everywhere handing out business cards. And I love what Doug Cash said. We have these podcasts, and I think there's just so many pearls shared. Jack Walsh, the macho male ego, I'm not going to do it unless I invented it. And we haven't invented anything. Certainly we have some creative ideas on how to teach this or that, but it's like, no, we're not reinventing the shape of the court and changing physical laws. So crazy, crazy, crazy.
No, I use a lot of your stuff. It was always my philosophy, know the world and steal the best. It's and so that's why I appreciate all the content you guys put out there. And a lot of it was very useful for me. But I just think the marketing of it and the selling of yourself and the self-promotion is like, let me ask you guys something. What's the secret of Spanish tennis? There's the secrets of Spanish tennis is out there. I remember one time they sent a real high-ranking USTA coach over to Spain when Spain was doing really well to study the secrets of Spanish tennis. What were they doing? How that country can have so many top 10 players, and the United States is struggling at the time. And so he wrote back to some of the coaches and he said, I discovered the secret of Spanish tennis. I said, oh, great. Then what is it? Then about a week later, he writes back and I said, they work harder. And I thought, I said, okay. I mean, what do you guys, the Spanish system, how does it differ from our system? And what is the secret of Spanish tennis for you guys?
What's the gentleman's name? Chris Lewitt? Is that it? He went to Cornell. He's got a book, Spanish Tennis 1. Now it's Spanish Tennis 2.0. I went through the program 2.5 times. I went through it once with the USPTA. No, I really enjoyed going through the training. I think you can learn from everyone. But it's, like the Aussies. I mean, the Aussies were great. The Swedes were great. And if you have one, you have two. And it goes back to like 1954 when Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. Well, if he can do it, I can do it with, when we were together in East Texas, Dave Anderson and I, a kid by the name of Chad Clark, he won one high school tournament when he was a sophomore, and it was a big deal back then. Everybody played high school tennis, so he won the 5A, the singles championship. There were so many kids that won it after he won it, and if he didn't win it, they probably wouldn't have won it because there's that thing: if he could do it, I can do it. So, when you look to your left, you look to your left, and you look to the right, and proud to be an American, but we're such an individualistic society. Like the Bryan brothers, they were a team. Okay, we are going to play doubles together. That was built in. We don't have what they have in Europe. We're going to train at our club. And, I think it was, David's mentioned it, David Anderson on this podcast with Nadal. And I'm sure he'll end up making great contributions to tennis for the decades to come. Just people just to know his story is unbelievable. What a class act. But, Nadal himself, it was really trial and error. I mean, with Uncle Tony, I mean, one of the other uncles, he was on the World Cup winning soccer team. And he was talking about attitude of the household. And, if you want to do your homework, like Nadal's mother would say, I want to talk to Uncle Tony. I want to talk to my brother-in-law. He's being too tough, but she never talked to him. And, and they turned down the Spanish system. But, the Spanish system too, like the UTR is copied off the French system. And with how many sets you get to play. So actually adversity. So the Spanish economy not being very good, for years. They set up 50 tournaments per year. And then we Americans, do our parents know when they go to the Eddie Herr, which is now called the IMG, or they go to the Orange Bowl and the 12s and 14s and they look at the draw? It's not even an international tournament. And then if you look at the draw sheet, just, people are just wowed by all these international flags. So a lot of times the parents, they don't really even know. But, I like the comment from Bum Phillips years ago, and he with a country-fied accent about Don Shula. He'll take his and beat yours, and he'll take yours and beat his. And we have a lot of people saying negative things about us, but on the positive side, we have a lot of people who say that we can take chicken, make a chicken salad, or we take a C athlete and make him an A player, but some people take an A athlete and make him a C player. And I don't want to take anything away from certain players, but we're not recruiting. We're not a developmental program. Is what does a player do in their 8, what they're doing in their 9. I think American society or American tennis society right now doesn't allow that to fly.
What academy or what coaches or what system has produced more good players than yours has? You've got so many people that you touch that are really, really good. What is there a place that does better than you guys do in that respect? Because I don't know of one.
Dave Anderson, go ahead.
Players.
Well, I mean, I think what you said, I've never really even looked outwardly at the competition. I've really tried to stay inward in my focus and not play that comparison game that way, to be honest. But I think that, track records speak for themselves. And it's certainly not limited to, myself, who, had the privilege of bumping into Steve decades ago. But I mean, I love it. And I tell our kids all the time, they're a part of the world's largest junior development program. You can call it an academy, whatever, through the GreatBase. And there's so many. I mean, this city, Dave, is filled with people who have been touched by it. And many people, though, they forget their roots and want to spread their wings in their own direction. And eventually most of them end up kind of realizing, man, I was part of something special. And I want to get back to being in that. But, I think there's lots of places that have high numbers throughout the country. They might run a great place that is high numbers, and they maybe work hard, and through that, some people are going to rise. I mean, the athletes will rise. I think what separates what we do is the fact that we, that board with 400 or 500 names on it for college kids. Literally on Monday, I made our kids at the 7 a.m. class. We went over to it, and I said, most of the great stories aren't at the named schools that they see on that board. There are some great ones, but it's not Shane Van Zandt from A&M, even though he was a great one and deserves it all. But I picked a kid that went to Midwestern State, and he was in the lowest part of Texas tennis. But making people that are maybe not overflowing with ability, but maybe even their opportunities have been limited prior to. And then getting those people down the road and playing college tennis and, playing 5-0 leagues in their 30s and 40s. I mean, to me, those are some of the coolest stories. And I think that, what gets America's attention is always a home run. Tonight at 9:00, a little after, a young girl that spent a lot of time with Ashlyn Kruger. She's playing out in Indian Wells and 40 in the world. And, but people outside of the people that have been involved with it, very, very few will ever make the connection. The last 12 years of her life. And I mean, she's had others helping along the way for sure. But, the great base that she established as a young girl was paramount to her getting to where she is. And I know she's going to go beyond where she is. So,
there's a lot of recruiting at the junior academy. It's just like college. I love the old saying, I could teach a chicken to run up a tree, but it's a lot easier to start with a squirrel. And there's a lot, there's a lot of truth to that in college coaching too. And anyway, I had a couple other items I wanted to ask you about. How many good players do you know that are around our age that didn't hit on a wall or a backboard? And why has that just gone away? I think it was just crucial to the development of me, and everybody my age did it. Every single good player I know, if you ask them, they spent a lot of time pounding away on a wall. And I just think maybe it's because clubs and tennis pros haven't found a way to monetize the wall. I don't know what the deal is, but that it has such a proven track record of success, but now it's non-existent almost at these clubs they're building.
Go ahead, Dave Anderson.
Yeah, it does seem to have gone away, doesn't it? Hard and quick. Probably in the last, from my perspective, the last 20 years, really hard.
You must have hit on the wall. I don't know, but you're from North Dakota. You're from Minot. You must have spent a lot of time pounding a ball on the backboard too, right?
I hit a wall almost every day that I could. Yeah. I think I enjoyed it. I loved it. I mean, I think nothing teaches you rhythm. And go ahead, Dave. What?
How valuable do you think that was to your development?
I think it was critical. I think it was a huge part of me being able to play the game a little bit, and it was fun. I mean, it was necessity.
Yep.
And I think that part of abundance that we have in our country right now has probably made things like that not as appealing. Plus, kids are, as Steve mentioned, overly structured in their days, and everything is program. And but we lost our wall here, and I'm trying to figure out how to get it back. We remodeled our club 2 years ago, and they tore down the wall, and but I think they are disappearing.
Do kids hit on the wall anymore by themselves? I've never seen a kid at the schoolyard hit a tennis ball on a wall in the last 30 years, I don't think. Do kids still do that, or
well,
no?
when you just go to tennis history, it's amazing. We say it over and over again, Einstein, if you don't know the history of your subject, you don't know your subject. Tyler, Texas, a town, 70,000 people. I took out a corporate membership at a racket club. Racquetball was booming, and then it faded. And, so rainy days, we had what we called our guinea pigs. And Dave, you would know, the number didn't really go past 10. And, we at one point developed more state championships titles, high school. That's when everybody's playing high school, than Dallas and Houston combined. But we got kids also too, and it's tougher today. We had kids build backboards at their house. There's so many things that that I don't have at my fingertips to just put online, but I've had parents build very creative backboards, ones that are on wheels that you can pull out of your house because the HOA won't let you build a backboard. It was a labor of love. I didn't really make any money off of it. I was really disappointed when all these people contacted me to how to make money off of it. But the GreatBase backboard, it was a tennis made in the 80s. The Swedes and the French made it mandatory for their tournament players to have these portable backboards. We built it within the same year. There was no patent on it. And, I'd done some homework on that. But 6 other people were trying to sell it. But then it comes down to your 3 things, Coach Geatz. The desire, your parents give you the opportunity to have this portable backboard, and then you don't have the desire to hit it. You can hit 40 balls in a minute. Actually, the Lenny Schloss who loves tennis, great guy, the Billie Jean King eye coach. He's come to spend some time with me. First, okay, I understand you need to be able to go through the stroke without going way back to a Chet Murphy. Do it without the ball first. And then just like in baseball, you can put the ball on a tee. Okay, now do it with a standstill ball. Now a toss ball. And there's just a progression. And then it comes down to repetition. But kids will get those backboards and they don't use them. And I meet with parents, say, tell me about your backboard. Well, we took it down. We didn't put it back up. I mean, it's just, it's like water. I mean, you need water. You need to hit the backboard. You need reps, and you got to get reps any way you can. Kid goes off to college. They should take a ball hopper with them, and then they should tour the campus. Okay, where can I hit against the backboard? But they should do the history of, like, say, who has great returns to serve. Agassi with the ball machine, Connors and Djokovic with the backboard. I prefer a backboard over a ball machine. What do you think, Dave Anderson?
Oh, 100%. A good wall. I mean, the benefits to it. I can't tell you how I miss the one at our club.
I agree about a wall better, but I'm not sure why I agree. Why wouldn't a ball machine be better? You can vary the spin and you're hitting a ball to a realistic part of the court. But for some reason, I always thought the wall was better, the way it rebounded and just you have to control your shot. I don't know. I agree, the wall.
I think one thing is with the tennis court and a ball machine, you'd need a tennis court. You need a ball machine. It's kind of like basketball. Here's a ball, here's a driveway, here's a hoop. Go play, go practice, do it on your own, solo drills. With, the negatives of a backboard, and you could think back, if you could turn the clock back, either one of you, I know I certainly could. And I became a tennis bum and working nights and hit balls all day, for like a solid 5 years. And I was taking lessons, and I remember I wasn't 9 years old. I was 19 years old, and I wasn't learning through osmosis. I was reading and taking lessons, and just full-fledged tennis bum in Boca. And people were really nice people, but they were lying to me. I mean, I was just given so much bad information. Most people hit against the backboard, they have no lessons. At least they're trying to hit the ball straight. But a backboard's not built straight up and down. It should be sloped at a 15-degree angle, so then you can come in and volley with a vertical racket face. At one time, there was a backboard called the Stan Smith ball back. You guys would remember that. Mm-hmm. That you could volley against. And most kids, when they hit against a garage door, they're developing skill, but they're not developing form because it's too horizontal to swing. A lot of the other kids, they don't want to break the windows. I was breaking windows with hockey pucks when I was a kid, but, you want to really elevate the ball, but you see the kid instantly hitting against the garage door. At least you're developing hand-eye coordination and they're getting the reps, and it really helps with footwork. It's like Connors, hitting off a backboard where it came back against a wooden surface and didn't have a lot of money in East St. Louis. And, for me, like say Connors, again, I thought you were a little bit older, Coach Geatz, with Jimmy didn't serve that well, but lefty is, you wouldn't convince me that, he wouldn't do well in the NCAAs. Even maybe not with his T2000, but even with, here's a question for you guys. They did it with Rocky 6, okay, you go back in time. Rocky fights somebody, now that he's, 50 years old, and obviously it was a movie, but, here's a matchup for you. Jimmy Connors versus, Andy Roddick. Anderson, you go first.
Yeah, I don't think, I think Connors would be able to hang very close to the baseline and still, have a good crack at nullifying the serve, at least getting neutral. I think it'd be a match where, especially if it were Connors near the end of his career, where he kind of discovered that he was really a better tennis player when he was going forward a little more. I think if he played like that,
and Coach,
I'd give the edge to Connors, to be honest.
Well, you just said that, give the edge. And Coach Geatz, you and I need to write a book and definitely have a chapter or two on Ty Tucker, because the way he gets kids to work so hard. But Ty will say, if these players play 10 times, but society doesn't think that, okay, they just play once. Or then what surface do they play on? But then you have your checklist. Who's got a better serve? Well, Jimmy's lefty. Jimmy can move it around. But Andy Roddick obviously had one of the best serves in the world for a long time. He's number one American for a long time, just like Jimmy. But Connors has this return to serve. And, they both had some flaws in their game. And who was a better doubles player, Jimmy Connors or Andy Roddick? Let's go with you, Coach Geatz.
I got to think with that return to serve, man, if you can return like Jimmy Connors, Jimmy Connors had some big advantages over Roddick, though. Jimmy Connors, his backhand was just money, and Roddick was a weakness. And but Roddick had a gigantic forehand, and Jimmy didn't. But to ask about the Connors Roddick, that's really interesting because I think each 10 years, I think the players are just better. I watched Carlos Alcaraz play, and I said, I was just watching, and he was 18 at the time. I said, you know what? This is the best tennis player that's ever lived. I have never seen a guy that there's no discernible weakness. Sinner, that guy might be the best tennis player that's ever lived. He's going to beat any one of the old guys in their prime. I know it's rackets and it's string and it's other things, but I don't know what Alcaraz's weakness is. As a coach, what do you guys tell him to beat Alcaraz? You just keep enough balls and play and hope he gets a little bored and tries a stupid shot. But his serve is great. His volleys are great. His drop shot's great. His forehand is huge. It's great. His backhand is great. His movement is great. I don't see any weakness other than maybe just, emotional, just maturity with his shot selection. I mean, he's a shot maker. He's going to go for balls.
You go with back to doubles with Roddick and doubles with Connors. Connors won Wimbledon and the U.S. Open playing doubles. And then the big money came into it. And like Roddick really never played doubles. But, Roddick, when the U.S. was really struggling for doubles players and they took too long to give the Bryan, in my opinion, they took too long to give the Bryan brothers a shot. I mean, Chris Woodruff is a great tennis player, but he once played doubles for the U.S. Davis Cup team. And the young Bryan brothers at that time were available. So, yeah, the story of circumstance, they changed the grass at Wimbledon. But I do think that someone could come along, and I think with Alcaraz, but Alcaraz is serve. He's got chain puller syndrome. His body goes up, down. He's not going to reach his max on his serve. And then you start talking about Milan and who's talking to him and who could convince him and should he change his serve. People are really realizing, especially in the ad court, second serve, he's kicking it. People are just teeing off on it. But his movement and overall, his game overall from a technical standpoint is better than centers. In center, I had a parent say the other day, well, how did the snow skiing help center? I couldn't believe the parent asked that. Just because of balance. And, what a great athlete and what a risk taker. His brain type comes into it. He's so calm, so controlled. But someone should be able to come along and say, hey, I'm going to be able to take care of my own serve. And, you go back to, Dick Gould. I have an email on my phone that Federer sent to Mackenzie McDonald. I do a lot of work with Matt Clore, and I was helping Clore incognito. And then during COVID, McDonald was with us, and they both say the same thing. I don't care how you get there, get to the net twice a game. And, the green light stuff, you're up 40-love, you're up 40-15. I hope, Mason Vaughn, who just beat the number one kid in the U.S., is that, it's a great thing, but he's thinking, what's his plus minus? And, okay, I'm sure he won with movement and strokes and with brain power, but he has to, just like Jack Kramer was told 100 years ago by his father, he's the best junior in America. And he said, now you got to learn to play a man's game. And center's getting better, but center still, he's going for that $100 shot from the 10-cent position. And, it's like, say, Isner, I love listening to these guys on their podcasts. They're self-deprecating. They're Query and Isner are beating themselves up who had the worst backhand volley. But aren't people listening to that? I one time was at Saddlebrook with Krychek, and they're just going through the drill, and then Isner, everybody loves the guy. He's got a great personality. And it was, you get 2 points if you win at the net. Krychek can volley. So Isner yells out across all the courts, Krychek, you should win this one. And it's like, don't you think you should go back to your backhand volley? I mean, I've said this on a podcast before. The young guy from Tennessee, great guy, funny, Tennis Sangren. He left his car at our place one time because he had a hip operation, I think both hips. And I would never say it, but it was a situation where you're going to come back and say, tell you what, pro bono, come down here and I'll help you with your volley. And here's a guy who had 7 match points against Federer. So I end up in a practice court with him at the U.S. Open a couple of years later, and he comes up to me and goes, Coach, I still can't volley. And he's at the U.S. Open. And, people don't really take an off season. People don't train to say, I'm going to show up at Wimbledon and we could turn to the women as well. I mean, with Elena Rybakina, she's great and she's very close from a technical standpoint, but she's not going forward enough. And she's playing Swiatek. It's like, okay, that comes back to your Coach Geatz with Tilden, match play and spin of the ball, like what beats baseline. In tennis, it's like, okay, we all know A can beat B and B can beat C, but A can't beat C. And then you go back to Talbert's books on, but I don't think it's a brain trust anymore. I don't think it's a skull session. It's not cerebral, like people sitting around like, how are we going to get better?
Change. We talked about how tennis has changed the modern game, whatever. But why? What do you guys think about these people standing so? I mean, they're so far back. They're wiping the windscreen on return serves. They're so far back in the court. What do you think about that?
Well, I'll go, Dave. And Medvedev playing against Djokovic, was it 18 out of 19 times in a deuce court he serves and comes in, and the commentators are looking for jobs for the most part in this country. I mean, they're not being critical. I love Gilbert, though, and I'd like to ask you to tell the listeners about your win over Gilbert. But no, I did some homework, Coach Geatz, with your background. But no, so it is what it is. I mean, people are hitting drop shots because they're so far back. Now, I just like to think, even like, so Arthur Ashe is such a class act, what would he say? And, with, what adjustments did he make when he was playing against a young McEnroe? And, do kids, do young kids sit around a conversation like this? That doesn't happen very often anymore either. We're 3 generations in the same room and you're talking about it. But Pancho Gonzalez, his father took him to the local jail, and Vic Brady used to always tell the stories that had my kids stay here a couple of days. He's incorrigible. We can't control him. Worked a little bit as a burglar, but Jack Kramer as well. Jack Kramer was just dripping in honesty and competency. It's like, what are these people doing? But I think at every level, even like in college tennis, I loved it years ago. A freshman couldn't play, and they came in. They were part of a developmental program. You were born in 57, so by the time you went to college, you could play as a freshman, right, Coach Geatz?
Yeah, I could play as a freshman.
Yeah, so that was the developmental year. You couldn't have a car. You had to live in the dorm, and all those things have gone away. I mean, in that sense, there's too much freedom. There's too little structure, and that's where families do better than federations. But Coach Anderson, your turn, baby.
Well, I mean, to your point, we've spoke about this before on the return of serve. I mean, if you go back even to Sampras against Moya, who was one of the players back then that was just giving tons of court away on his return. Somehow was still able to, find a lot of balls dipping at Pete's feet, but he was coming, and Moya knew it, and at least Pete was going to force him to adapt one way or the other, or make him hit a really quality return, a very difficult return from those positions. And I think that there aren't a lot of people that are challenging the returners in that way. But it's an interesting thing. I mean, if when we were hanging out in North Dakota, Dave, and you mentioned Galen Allen, who it's funny to hear his name, but everybody thought he was the next Roscoe Tanner up there, and he was a big left-handed server, and but the thought of people hitting on average 80 plus miles an hour off the ground with a couple thousand RPMs on forehands, it seemed absurd back then. So these guys, if they miss their spots on the serve, they're going to be forced to hit a quality volley. But if they aren't experienced hitting quality volleys, I don't think many of them are going to take the chance. but because what they are experienced at is letting that thing bounce and then unloading 80-mile-an-hour forehand. And from there, it's basically, a very aggressive first feed in baseline game. And, but that's what they're accustomed to. And it's somewhat habit. And I think that, maybe not in the case of many of the Europeans and people like that we see, but I can tell you on our own home front here that the way that doubles has been mistreated, going back decades now, and the reduction of doubles, from the professional to the collegiate to the junior ranks, has had a very profound effect on people's ability to have a true plan A, plan B in singles.
Well, that's great input. Let me say one thing about Federer. There should be a book. And Roger is such a class act. Amazing, amazing guy. So Federer one time was asked, why don't players come to the net? And he had a very simple answer. They fear the low backhand volley. And, I just think of Jimmy Arias, whose father had a connection to math, and he worked for the Niagara Mohawk. And Nick Bollettieri saw Jimmy Arias just hitting in a public park and near the Bradenton, Florida area, and said, that's how you hit a forehand. And, Jimmy had the wrong grip on the backhand side, but he had that racket free falling. But it was before that, Newcomb, who couldn't really hit a topspin backhand very well, but he had the circular forehand, Tom Ocker, called the windmill forehand. But he's doing it with a Dunlop Max Ply. And, really, when it comes right down to it, I love the Braden philosophy. You need to be able to hit every shot from every position of the court, singles or doubles, every surface. I remember taking lessons from Ed Foster. Both his kids became really good tennis players. And, he used to just say that you got to love to hit every shot. And it's an avoidance. There's not enough creativity either. Like, okay, we're going to play one bounce doubles, crush and rush, and, just go play this way. And, play move up, move down with, instead of ego, and just do it with creativity. You can just be, okay, attack, counterattack, play the approach shot, come in. And I mean, for yourself, 37 years in college tennis, college coaches, just like everybody else, they want to win from the get-go. Their job's on the line. And I think that's one thing, is, Bill Tilden, his name coming up, tennis players are born out of defeat. And it's a good thing when you go in and you miss in a point in each situation. But, I was at one of these money tournaments, a girl we've coached with, she's been number one in the country. She's won a couple of national titles. And she's 15 and she's playing these pro tournaments. It's like, hey, just go. Just principle based, just go. And she was playing a girl that we've worked with, who played at UCLA, was one in the country. And so I show up at this tournament last week, and so there's a 15-year-old playing a 30-year-old, and I coached both of them. And the 30-year-old, hats off to being number one in the NCAAs, and hats off to still playing. And it doesn't matter that you're 5'3". What about Rosie Casals? What about Billie Jean King? What about, there's just Justine Henin. There's some players that you don't have to be a giant to play the game. That's a great thing about tennis. It's not a discriminating sport as such as volleyball or basketball. I mean, even football with size.
Yeah. Anybody dream about being a great player. I mean, if you want to dream about being the next running back for the Green Bay Packers, you essentially have to be a genetic freak, or, power forward for the Los Angeles Lakers. You got to be a genetic freak to be able to do that. Where tennis is room for, I was thinking about what we said earlier about, what it takes to be great: ability, opportunity, and desire. But I always thought there was David Wheaton used to come out and practice with our team at Minnesota when he was there. And David was good. He was maybe 10 in the world, somewhere around there. And he semi'd Wimbledon, maybe semi'd the U.S. Open. He was a very good player. And he'd beat Nag and all these guys. And I would watch him every day in practice. And I thought, okay, I can see he's good, but his forehand could be a little shaky. He didn't move that good. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I came up to him one day. I said, God, how are you 10 in the world beating all these guys? And, I kind of think, don't look that great to me. I didn't say it that way. But Wheaton said, you know why? He goes, because I believe. He goes, I went to the academy with Agassi, and we go play ping pong, and we battle like dogs in ping pong. And then we shoot some hoops and basketball. We're competing. I beat him sometimes. And he goes, when I walk on the court with those guys, I think I belong. people don't think they belong. He goes, I just, I've been doing all that stuff with Agassi and all those guys at IMG forever. I walk down the court and I'm playing Agassi. It's the same thing as playing them in ping pong for $5 a game or something. And I think that's a big thing. Wheaton walked out there and said, you know what? It's not a big moment for me. I've done this before. And he believed. So,
David Wheaton, you dig out the archives. Later in his career, he came out to California to work with Braden. And just like you or Coach Anderson hitting off the backboard when you were a young guy, as good as David Wheaton was, it's like, gee, you just could have been told this when you were younger, because he wasn't brought up really through that type of informational training. Going back to the genetic freaks, I
remember Wheaton. One I was at, not to get off the track with tennis, but you're throwing out these names, and I was playing with Raman Jayapathy, who we talked about offline, Dave, and it was at one of the tournaments, and I think we had won the 18 doubles. And there was the local news over there interviewing this young guy, and it was Wheaton who had won, I think, the 14s or 16s, and Raman and I couldn't figure that out, why they were over there talking to him and not us. But a few years later, he ended up making it a bit further down the road.
Both my sons, 2 sons, 2 months, 2 weddings. So I was in New York, my son Connor's wedding, and I should be able to tell you the gentleman's name. I believe it was Horton, but I should have his name for sure. But he was a genetic freak at the wedding. Like, who's this guy? I mean, he was a walking statue. He's just like, and then Pete Cobelt was there, Peter Cobelt. And Peter Cobelt is 6'7", and when he was on the Ohio State campus, some of the football players called him Little Petey. But then you just study your sport, and with you don't have to be a refrigerator to go to the net. But it certainly helped that Cobelt's 6'7". So one of these Teddy Roosevelt quotes. I spent so much time in North Dakota. A quote from him is, "You've won half the battle if you just believe in yourself." And that number one is the inner belief system. So I love what you say about the internet stealing the kid of that belief system. Like, well, I'm a 7 on the UTR, and all these other kids are 11s. How can I ever compete? And to play D1 tennis, I got to be a 13 instead of just put your head down and go to work.
I learned something about that belief system from Bruce Lipka. I think Bruce is one of the best coaches out there. He's won a bunch of awards, and he's now the first-year head coach at Penn State. But, Bruce is into studying tennis from outside of tennis. And he was talking about the inner belief system. And everybody has an inner voice they talk to themselves. And if your inner voice says, God, you suck, or you're not good enough, your backhand's no good, if your inner voice is 3 negative comments for every positive comment that you make inside yourself, you're considered clinically depressed. Now, the tipping point in life where you're set to flourish and achieve your true potential is a 3-to-1 ratio of positive to negative. So every time you have that feeling, I can't do this, the guy's too good, or God, my serve's bad, and your inner voice is saying that, you got to recognize that. And you got to say, I can do this, I'm getting better. Or you got to make 3 positive comments to really achieve your true potential. And I think that's exactly what you talked about your belief system. And he just was able to quantify it a little bit from some of the psychology studies he read. And I thought that was interesting.
I think going back to Bruce Lipka, I certainly watched him coach years and years ago. He had a connection with Ty Lee and with, but now he's at Penn State. Okay, now his work's going to be measured, but will it be measured by, does he take a number 8 player and make him a number 1 player? Is he an incoming freshman? So you use the term coach, and obviously he's a deep thinker, and people should seek out Bruce Lipka. They're going to learn greatly from Bruce Lipka. But coming back to a lot of times these conversations don't go back to the womb. What did they do in early childhood development? The way the brain works. And, that's where I really feel sorry for college coaches. They're recruiting kids that are so poorly taught. And our coaches aren't going out there. One of our students did this recently. He recruited some people that we had taught, and I go, well, they don't have a winning record. They really haven't proven themselves as a competitor. And it was a young coach, and he said, I'll tell you what. He goes, I got 2 choices. I can bring in players who I just have to rebuild their game technically. This is D3 tennis. I have to rebuild their game technically, or I'm going to take this kid he's got great ball striking skills, but he hasn't put it together yet. So I really think too in these conversations is, okay, let's define teaching and let's define coaching and like Federer, again, coming back to the book that should be out, you need the right, and if everybody was called a coach, you need the right coach at the right time. And, then that's all your years in college tennis. You're even starting to play some senior tennis now, correct?
Yes, I did. And an interesting thing for me, I can tell you how important technique is and doing it the right way. I said when I retired, I want to win a 65 national championship. I want to win a gold ball. And so I quickly discovered, you know what? I don't think I'm good enough to. And then my arm, I started getting better and better and better. But I played tennis with my whole life with one hand, and my arm was killing me. And the doctor says, you got to quit. You have severe arthritis in your elbow. So I said, fine, I'm just going to hit a two-handed forehand and a two-handed backhand. My backhand always stunk in tennis. Hitting it for 40 years, I didn't have a good backhand. So I picked up another hand on it. I started from scratch, and I watched some of your videos. I watched some tape. I just want to make sure I did it right. And I hit 1,000 balls a day on the wall. And I'm into this 1 year, and my backhand with two hands after doing it for less than a year is way better than my one-handed backhand ever was. And so that's why I know that great base when you're starting off is so important, to do it right, do it early, and do it a lot. And that's all there is to it, honestly. I would think if I did something for 40 years, I can't pick up something in 9 months and I'll completely change it and be better. But that's what happened to me, and that's why I love the wall.
Well, the human spirit, 1,000 balls a day, getting after it. Let me ask you a question. I read where when you were the coach at Minnesota, you and a group of guys won the 5-5 nationals. Is that right?
Yeah, we won. Yeah, we did. We won the 5-5 nationals. Yeah.
And how old were you then?
God, I was I think I was 50 or something.
So movement in senior tennis, you and I were talking about that a couple weeks ago, where with the Braden Library, one of my millionaire friends introduced me to a billionaire friend. It's like, this is what should be done. I could ask you about, to digress, when you were at Hong Kong dealing with all those billionaires with backhands. If we could have somebody donate some money to us and say, let's get this out there. And, but yeah, I think that's great that you were, still playing, at that time. So I went to the senior tournaments, and, the people who move the best, like, they're just natural, or the people who are doing yoga, they're doing flexibility. It's really interesting to just look back and see how people age. Like Sampras certainly aged a little bit, in my opinion, aged a little bit faster than Agassi. And, so Agassi played just a couple more years.
Well, but my five, when I was playing 5-5 and we won in Vegas, I wasn't playing singles. If I played singles, I'm just going to get whacked because I don't move as well. I don't get to the ball. Hey, I had one question for you and Dave. I wanted Dave to answer this as well. They did one thing at Penn every year. I would try and learn from the psychology. Angela Duckworth is a professor at Penn, and I learned a lot from speaking with Angela, who wrote the book Grit. And I learned a lot about the most popular class at Penn was a class on how to be happy. Penn was the leader in positive psychology in the world. People studied depression forever. But Penn, they started studying what does it take to be happy, and that became a really popular class. And what Penn would do is every Wednesday at noon, they would have a 60-second lecture where they would invite these brilliant people to come up, and you got 60 seconds to tell everybody what you maybe think was the most important thing you ever learned in your life that could really help somebody. And so I saw a finance guy get up and talk, and he said, you know what? What I learned was it's easier to hold on to your morals and convictions 100% of the time than it is 99% of the time. And I thought about it for a second. I thought, it didn't make sense. And I realized, yeah, he's right. You slip once and it's over for you. So I guess it's a long way to get around a question, but I want Dave, if you could give 60 seconds of advice, maybe the most important thing you ever learned in tennis to help a guy get better or to improve. Give me your best 60 seconds.
Well, I think tennis to me is one area, life is the other. I think my mom gave me great advice. she taught us that, not just me, but our family, that happiness was 100% an internal state, and it was never dependent on outside factors. So anytime we complained of anything or boredom or anything, she always reminded us of everything was really an internal decision that we were going to make or not make. And I think it's the same in tennis. I mean, to me, 60 seconds, now I'm down to about 30 for tennis. There's no point of arrival. There's only checkpoints, but there's no real point of arrival. And there isn't one stage that is more beautiful than the other. Every single stage you go through has beauty to it, and you might as well enjoy it because you're going to be out of it pretty quickly and on to the next one. But I think understanding that there was no point of arrival, and I remember Jim Lair saying that years ago. You never gain immunity to things like choking, but for me, tennis, it's just same with coaching. There is no arrival point, and you just got to learn to really enjoy it every single stage.
Coach Geatz, that's amazing. There's no schools in Minot, North Dakota. That's an amazing answer.
No, it is an amazing answer. I learned something on the podcast, but that's why I want to be the guy who asked the question.
I got a question for you on, there's obviously great schools in Minot, North Dakota, but obviously Minot begins with M.
I don't know if there are.
And Anderson's.
Wait a second, Steve. This is my show now. I want your 60 seconds. Best piece of advice you got. It could be tennis. It could be anything that every kid should know. Just something that you think would be really beneficial.
For tennis?
It doesn't matter if it's tennis or anything else.
Well, I say for tennis is it'd be very important to learn how to hang on to the racket efficiently. And then secondly, it would be very important how to swing the racket efficiently. And it'd be very, very important to, just like in elementary school, building blocks, that's our logo, is have a foundation. And, I had the Catholic nuns in grade 1 through such and such in elementary school. And, no substitute for a good beginning. And then also that gets into the parenting and the principles. So that would be my 60 seconds. But Angela Duckworth, I have a question for you is, I heard her speak one time and she said, empathy is the number one thing that gives people grit. What's your comment on that? Caring about others.
Empathy? God, I've never heard that before. Where'd you hear that from, Steve?
From her.
From
Angela Duckworth. The empathy that, like you 37 years of coaching teams, is you care about your teammate. I understand. I don't know if this is true, but on Mickey Mantle's tombstone, it says, "I was a great teammate." And that, like young kids coming up that really, that they don't want to disappoint their parents. Chrissy Everett says you got to the point where, okay, I have to learn to play for myself. But at the same time, my old man, we used to leave the house and he would say, "Don't embarrass the family." So thinking about somebody else, Doug Cash said it so well. Great to have Dave Anderson on with Yvonne. Doug Cash has these rules, and one is would his mother say he's doing something. How's it go, Yvonne? My mother would agree with it or approve of it.
Well, my mother would approve of it. Would my father approve of it? If it was written on a newspaper, would that be all right?
Hey, let's do this. Coach, give us a shout out for Tal Goodman. I've got other people here. Carl Hale, Tim Cass. I got other people. Dave Ocho. But give us a shout out for Tal Goodman. He's a great story.
Oh, he's an unbelievable story. I just can't. I mean, he came in as a number 13 guy in the 12-man team, and a lot of kids would have given up. But I think, again, he had a really good, solid base of fundamentals. And now all of a sudden he goes from not playing for 3 years. He's a senior and he's playing top 3 for Penn and he's winning. And he just kind of hung in there. He didn't get discouraged. Usually, I don't know, Steve might know the percentages, but I would say if you go to a college team and you don't play as a freshman, I'd say the odds are way better than 50-50. You never play.
Well, there's a stat for that, 85%. It's a scary deal. I mean, about 85% of kids who don't make it as a freshman don't make it. So, yeah, perseverance. But I'm sorry to interrupt on Tal. Go ahead.
No. And you know what? The greatest kid in the world, too. I think Richard Hernandez was his coach, right?
Right, yeah.
And you had a big influence on Tal, too. he's the kind of guy you root for. You just root for the guy. He's just a good kid, man.
Well, I think with your three things, with opportunity, with ability, and desire, he always had the desire, very authentic, always the same in every situation. If you asked him to go out and teach a group of 8-year-olds for 30 minutes, he's going to do it and not complain. Obviously a kid would rather be over there playing tiebreakers or, hitting some balls, but hey, you're helping out the little kids right now. So class act, great job with the family, bringing him up, but also too the opportunity. He grew up at the, Aunt Dave and I went there a long time ago to help Richard out. We were all together studying tennis back in the 80s. And so, Richard said one time, the best thing for Tal Goodman is just push him out of an airplane without a parachute. It's like, Richard, I don't think we could do that. But, it's like that where you just jump in the middle of the swimming pool instead of just putting your toe in the water, just go for it. And
that's right. What's that old saying? You get the mountain, just jump, and you build your wings on the way down. You just figure it out.
Say that again.
You said jump, and you build your wings on the way down. And
I heard you say something one time. Just push them on the stage and see how they do. Something like that. With
I said a lot of dumb things. One year at Penn, what the guys did was they made a little list for me. And every stupid thing I said during the whole course of the year, they put it on a little thing and they gave it to me on senior day. Just a memorable dumb comment I'd made throughout the year. And so it's pretty funny. I still got that hanging up in my garage.
Hey, let me throw in a quick story before you send another question to us. We were going to ask you about baby food. I know you want to flip the switch because you're so humble, but one time in Florida, you brought your team to visit and you're like a little kid. You just want to talk tennis, and really, in the end, your team really didn't want to be there. But your alpha dog was a foreign player, and I'm thinking, okay, this kid's not on an athletic scholarship at Penn. And within 15 minutes, I was tearing the skin off that kid, and I felt like it was a successful. I had their attention for the next 3 hours or whatever it was. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you gave a lecture. I was so pissed at. I thought. See, I loved it, and I wanted the guys on the team to love it as much as I did. And I wanted them to be able to soak up the information, and they just wanted to go to the beach and pick up chicks and whatever. It just kind of bothered me a little bit that I cared more than they did.
Well, one thing though, when people come to visit, they don't realize coaches who come, they're like, whoa, because it's all about character. I could just read the room and Dennis Vandermeer taught me that a long time ago, is you got to go for the alpha dog. You go to do a school assembly or whatever, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
You got to go for the alpha dog.
You read the room perfect on that. One thing Dave said, which I thought was one of the best answers I've ever heard to that 60-second question, and he came up with it without having any time to think about it at all. That was pretty impressive, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, he's no Fred Foreman. Why don't you tell Coach Anderson, Coach, tell Coach Geatz who Fred Foreman is.
Well, he was a project of mine back in Minot. Great guy, though.
Funny. You guys are. I don't know what you guys have. I don't know all three of you guys. The guys, I haven't met that many people from North Dakota, but there's got to be something in the water. But Freddie's a funny guy, and I've just teased David over the years. Is that you may be the second best tennis teacher in the history of Minot, North Dakota. So
one thing that Dave said about kind of like happiness, and if you're bored, it's within you. It's you can change, you can flip the script. And I found that out when I had I got rushed into emergency open heart surgery, and I almost died twice. Number one, I almost died getting there. And then my heart, after they did it, my heart stopped in the middle of the night, and I almost died again. So they rushed me in, they had to give me a pacemaker. They cut open my chest, and I was flat on my back for couldn't do anything for 3 months. I was flat on my back for 10 days, just lying there. And when I got out of the hospital, I was unbelievably happy. They talk about an attitude of gratitude, but I walk outside and I go, God, look at the beautiful tree and the sun's shining down on me. It feels great. And the wind's in my face. And I was so appreciative of all the little things. I don't think I've ever been happier in my life. But unfortunately for me, I wasn't able to sustain that attitude of gratitude. I know how important it is. I'm better at it now, but I kind of was slowly regressing to the whiny little turd I always was, and I thought, I want to be able to sustain that and I think the attitude of gratitude is huge for your happiness. Be thankful for what you got. And I was just thankful to be outside. I go out, I said, wow, I almost didn't get to see that movie with my wife, or I almost didn't go for that walk and hold her hand and, tell her I love her or whatever. And just stupid little things.
Wow. How long ago was that?
Now, maybe it was about 8 years ago.
Wow. One thing we'll do with David Anderson's answers, Yvonne, we'll take that 1 minute answer. We'll write out word for word and we'll post it. That was a great answer.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Your wife and the trees and the sun.
Yeah, I mean, I was happy. I was just grateful for all the little things. And when you stop and think about it, we've all got it made. I mean, we all did well, and we've all got it made. And I just kind of remember that when I start feeling sorry for myself and get a little whiny and the woe is me and this crap that just have an attitude of gratitude. I think it's super important. It's the same thing Dave's mom told him in part of his 60-second answer. It's up to you. You're bored, it's your fault.
Yeah.
So
where's your son teaching tennis?
My son is the tennis director at Westchester Country Club. And so that's what I mean. Tennis has been sure good for me. I don't know what my kid would have done if it wasn't for tennis. But,
I read where he's top 30 in the country. He was a junior. He came back from Nebraska, played for you. That must have been a great experience.
Well, it was in a way. I always dreamed about my kid coming to play for me at Minnesota. So I was always wanting him to come. And my wife said, no, he can't come play for you. It'll be horrible. He needs to get away. He needs to grow up. So I took him down to University of Nebraska, and they gave him a scholarship, and he plays there for 1 year. And then he says, I want to come home. I want to come home. And I said, you can't come home. That coach is a friend of mine, Kerry McDermott, and he gave you a full ride. And I said, he did every single thing he ever promised. And you're not going to come back home. You can't play for me anymore. You're there. And so the next thing I see, my wife sends him a plane ticket and he's back home. And I said, okay, you're not going to get a scholarship. I'm not going to pay for you to go to school. Yeah, I'm not going to give you a scholarship. You should have stayed there. And then I realized that I'm just the one who's paying for his school. It's hurting me. And so he did. He came back and enrolled in Minnesota, and it was one of the best things I ever did, and one of the worst things I ever did too. So it's but I want him to stay there. I want him to live up to his commitment. I didn't want him to leave, and but I really didn't have a choice in the matter.
No, that's great for our listeners to hear that, because we have people who are trying to have their kid get to the point where they can.
I'll see my kid's 14 years old, and Nuke's Tennis Academy gives him a full ride. You can go down there, all expenses paid, everything. Maybe he was 10 or 15 in the country, something like that at the time. And so my wife said, oh, great, this is an opportunity. And I said, he's not going to go to an academy. I said, I want to raise my kid. I know what goes on at some of the academies. I don't want him to go. I want to raise my kid. And, oh, no, this is a great opportunity for him. I said, absolutely not. Next thing I know, she's in the car driving him down to Nuke Tennis Academy. And I thought, okay.
Was he a short-term student, or was he there long-term?
No, he was supposed to be there he was going to be long-term. He was going to graduate from high school there, but he went down there and he partied like crazy, and he was making bad grades in school, so my wife took him home. So
his name was DJ, correct?
Yeah. So he was a one semester at Nukes. And
yeah, I remember him.
Nukes was great. They worked really hard. They worked them hard. They had good coaches at Nukes. They cared. Tennis was great. He was surrounded by good players. All that was good. And I don't blame Nukes for any of that. That was just on him. He didn't have the maturity at 14 years old to do it.
With Coach Geatz, ask Coach Anderson a question. What do you got?
Best win you ever had in tennis, Coach Anderson?
The best win I ever had in tennis. No, I think TJ Tisdale and I played a big money tournament down in Houston, and filled with some really good players. Tommy Ho, I remember Justin Bauer, who was a great player. many others. And we ended up in the doubles and won a couple of rounds. And we ended up playing Chad Clark and Trey Phillips. Chad, who I had been with from a young boy, and Trey Phillips, and they were out on the tour playing. And, they were right around 150 in the world, I think. And we came close in that one. But in terms of, in my later years, I played a doubles event here in Dallas. There were a lot of good events and played some really good players. And a young guy that was very high in the NCAAs, got into the top a couple hundred in the world, Ignacio Hirigoyen, they used to call him Nacho. Nacho played number one for SMU, and they were the one seeds in the doubles, and I played with a coach on my staff who, and we beat Nacho and a left-handed British guy. I'm forgetting his name right now, but everybody was, they had pretty much given them the match going in, and I remember playing very loose, very free, and it was a great win. In singles, I think there's no great names that I've been lucky. I've won the Texas age groups, 25, 35, stuff like that, and been in the top handful in the men's open. But I remember in singles in Tyler, Texas, playing a futures when I really didn't know what I was doing, and I was making all these changes in my game, and beat Vojko Ferch in the first round, who was a seed in the qualies, and then I played Craig Tiley, and that was a one-sided affair. And then I went through Tiley, and it was my final round to get into the main draw, and I lost to a New Mexico kid named Steve Otero.
Oh my God, Steve Otero's coach in college.
Yeah, I thought you might have been. That's why, and I lost to him in a tight match, and that would have been to get into the main draw, the first futures I ever played. So I didn't really have any great wins, but that doubles win over Nacho was the big one, because he could play. Nacho was.
Steve Otero could play. You're playing at a pretty high level of tennis, then. Kind of like, that's a pretty good level of tennis. Steve Otero was a very, very good Division I player, maybe a top 50 guy in the country. Good. He was good.
Well, he was better than me for sure. I hung with him just because I think athletically I was, as good or better than him athletically. But he was just, like you, Dave. Even though we had tennis on our mind all year, there was other sports. But yeah, that was probably, I played a lot of fun matches though. My most fun tennis experiences were with probably Dave Severson out here playing, a senior tennis legend. And we just, at the end of the night, we would meet. This is in the last 10 years, and we just meet and play 3 sets every night. And, he went on to be a 2-time world champ, and I think he has more gold balls than he could ever count. And, but it was just brawling and sparring. And I think that's what's missing in today's world. Kids just want to play baseline games and hit. They don't suit up and play.
A side note, Dave Anderson, we should get Severson on our podcast. Coach Geatz, your successor, when you took a pivot, and you did it twice in your career, the Hong Kong Country Club and the Greenwich Village Country Club, or Greenwich, Connecticut Country Club. Didn't Hubert Crash? Did Hubert Crash follow you? You remember that name, or did he follow you?
Hubert followed me to Hong Kong, and he was the tennis director of the Hong Kong Country Club, which is the richest club in all of Asia. I mean, that club sits right on Repulse Bay in the South China Sea, and it's billionaire city. It's kind of an amazing club. It's they do racial profiling there. They have a quota. There can only be 14% Americans, 22% Australians, 20% Chinese. They have a exact quota of how many people from the world they let in, and everybody there has got it's the richest club in all of Asia, and that's where Hubert went after I left.
Well, to connect the stories, Hong Kong Country Club and Hubert, I remember David Anderson beating Hubert, and but Hubert said no, that didn't count, because he told me how to change my game, and he played me when I was changing my game.
I did. I did. I beat Hubert. I worked on his game, changed every grip, and then I put him in a tournament with me.
He was a very good player for University of Texas, and I think he may have been top 5 in the world in the 45s or something too. He was good. He was always in unbelievable shape, and I remember Carl Hale grabbing him around the throat and telling him he was going to kill him though at one tournament.
No, I've heard that story. Tell us about Carl. Carl Hale done so many things in tennis. He's the director of the Canadian Open, and at one time he had a timeshare. Or maybe just owned a second home in Tampa. So he would maybe 4 times a year be in Tampa, and he would show up and he'd have like 3 rackets that did match. I remember one time my son was in the 18s, and I said, Connor, I need to have you play a match if you do this instead and come down here and play a match. And so Connor did win it. Connor did win it 3, but Connor has so many tricks. He says to Connor, he says, he does this guy, who's this, 38-year-old or whatever, and doesn't have matching rackets. And he says to Connor, he goes, you don't want to warm up. Let's not warm up. And next thing Connor's down a set, and Connor goes, why didn't you tell me this guy could play?
He was ridiculously talented. I still keep in touch with Carl a lot. He's the director of the Rogers Cup now, one of the big wigs in Canada tennis. And Carl was so talented. And Carl was never in any danger of overtraining. Let me put it that way.
Right.
But he's just a good guy and a heck of a talent.
With what happened in that story, it maybe happened more than once, but Carl couldn't play. Carl was a competitor. It was at a money tournament in Toronto. There used to be so many money tournaments. And Hubert, he said something to Carl about, hey, no, don't stop playing. And he was really hurt, obviously. And my understanding is just, Carl's a pretty easygoing guy. He's a man's man. Everybody loves Carl Hale. He takes him behind the curtain, and he's just, he let Hubert know where the Bear Cross River. Here's a great story. I had this guy sent to me, and he's coming in to coach, but he thinks he's just a coach of high-level players. He thinks he's a high-level player. And of all people, I'm working with Neil Anderson, who played for University of Florida, the Chicago Bears. He came to our place 3 different times, and the third time he had watched our 25-hour course the third time, and he looked at me and he said, your system, it's not my system, but he goes, your system's not going to work. And I go, yeah, I know, because it's work. And he said, exactly. But he really worked on his game. Andy Brandy sent him to us. Then, now he's playing golf because it hurt his knees. But so this guy had the audacity. I'm working with Neil Anderson, and this guy's in the room, and I'm just doing video analysis. And this guy said in front of Neil Anderson, he said, well, you're just working with adult recreation players. I work with athletes. And it was just, so anyway, Carl was bringing his 2 daughters by, and he was showing up in like 5 minutes. And I said, okay, all right, we'll go through a few things. And I didn't say anything. And I said, Carl, you have no choice. You're going to play this guy, and you're going to beat this guy's brains in. So, and he did. Carl, breadsticks and bagels. He beat the kid. And it's like, sometimes you got to have people like Carl around to help you teach humble pie,
Carl was one of my favorite guys. He really, he's just a truly nice man. And, that's I think the older you get, the quality of your life doesn't depend on how much money you make, and it does depend on, a lot of things, but the quality of your life depends, I think, on your relationships you have. If you don't have a good relationship with your wife, or nobody likes you, you can make all the money in the world and you got a bad quality of life. But that's what I miss about not coaching. I miss the guys, and I miss the stupid things. Like, I miss practice. I miss getting in the van and driving for 8 hours and telling stories about each other, and the team dinners. And, that's the stuff I miss. Not going to another NCAA rule meeting and trying to raise money for NIL and all this stuff. So,
well, you certainly touched a lot of lives. What about Tim Cass? He like Carl, he played for you in New Mexico?
Tim Cass played for me at University of New Mexico, and Tim Cass is one of the best combinations of a knowledgeable tennis guy combined with great business skills and great PR fundraiser. He's a pretty talented guy in a lot of different areas. And Tim Tim ended up running the National Tennis Center for a while. He was supposed to be the next AD at University of New Mexico. And I don't know. Tim's done extremely well. So I think I don't know what Tim's doing now. I think he's kind of retired. He left National Tennis Center.
Yeah, I understood he was instrumental with rebuilding a New Mexico athletic facility. And
oh yeah, Tim raised a lot of money. He built a brand new tennis stadium there. He redid the basketball arena. Tim was a great fundraiser. He was a great friend raiser. You know, people just liked him, and he'd raise money, and you didn't even know he was asking for it.
That's a great way to put a great friend raiser. That's good.
Yeah, no, he was. So I talked to Tim. You know, I keep in touch with those guys once in a while. I had some great guys that played for me, and it's one of the biggest thrills I get is when they call me up just to say how they're doing, and it's nice to see them be successful. And it's also kind of nice to feel like maybe you had some tiny little part, maybe not a lot, but you had some little impact, yeah, in a positive way. And they invite you to their weddings and stuff. It means the older you get, the more sentimental you get, the more that stuff means to you. What did you guys say before? They don't care how much you know until you show them how much you care.
You found out today that's a Teddy Roosevelt quote. It's down as a Teddy. I thought it was a Chuck Creasy quote, but my homework on Teddy Roosevelt, I just think about it was maybe the first time I heard that. Hey, Coach Geatz, tell us, your dad said if you fell in a pile of horse manure, you'd walk out with a brown suit. How'd you go from being an electrical engineer and tell us about your dissertation? How'd you get lucky and how'd you get through all that?
No, I thought I was supposed to be asking the question.
I snuck one in. I think the dissertation, that people should hear that about value for sports and one's life, because that really ties in with Tim Cass and Carl Hale and all the people you've worked with.
I found out when I was coaching University of New Mexico, I could go to school for free. And so I decided, I might as well take some classes for free. And I just kept taking classes and ended up with a PhD. And I wrote my dissertation. I wanted to see if college athletics had a value, what the value was, positive, negative. And so what I started doing was to be successful in life. So I found a test which has 14 different measurements of success and 14 different measurements of how well you have your act together. And I tested all the team sport athletes. I tested individual sport athletes. I tested, team captains, and then I tested a bunch of other areas of school, like students highly involved in extracurricular activities. Students, and I wanted to compare what helped you the most. And what I found out was that the people that developed the skills to succeed later in life were people that were highly involved in extracurricular activities, even ahead of where athletics would place you. And I found out that individual sports were better for developing these characteristics than some team sports. But I think my study was really, really flawed because the tennis kids came in with great grades and the golf kids come in with good grades. And University of New Mexico, is recruiting a lot of inner city kids in basketball that just had no grades. They junior college transfers. And so they were starting further behind the eight ball. So I think it was really a flawed study. I think I should have compared athletes with similar GPAs to regular students with the same type of GPA and same background, and then see who developed these skills. So I don't really place a lot of value in the study I did. The only value it had was it got me my PhD, which I never did anything with.
That's obviously certainly many things. Academic endurance trip. That doesn't.
That's all it was. Academic endurance trip. That's right. It's not any test of mental horsepower whatsoever. It's just a test if you can stick to it. And it seems like these professors, they want to make you jump over tons of hoops and hurdles. Oh, no, your dissertation is not right. You got to change this. Oh, no, you got to change this. And pretty soon I'm changing it back to the way it originally started. I remember finally I said, no, this is my dissertation. This is what I want to do. I want to compare athletes to the general student population. This is the way I want to do it. And they finally approved it. So, but it was a test of endurance. That's all it is.
No, it's great that you got that approved. Vic Braden's ABD, which means all but dissertation. He wanted to prove that a kid is better on the athletic field the court, the field, whatever venue there are. But he was turned down, and he turned his back and said, okay. And he did all the work, but he didn't do his dissertation.
God, I would be interested to read Braden's thing, because that's pretty much exactly what mine was. I wanted to prove that athletics was really beneficial for you. But again, you're comparing athletes who are getting into school with way lesser academics and way less. They didn't have good study habits when they went. That's why their grades weren't as good. And they didn't have big desire to do well academically. That's why their grades weren't as good. So it was a little bit like comparing apples to oranges. And I just didn't think it was fair.
It was short-lived. It was on, I believe, ESPN. I could be wrong. I think it was ESPN. But I was there when it was being shot. It didn't go past one season. But it was called Vic's Vacant Lot. And Vic had a TV series. And it was how to help kids. It was was too bad that it didn't get some air behind the sails and didn't stay.
So what did Vic find out? That athletics was beneficial to developing character, and what were his findings?
Well, I can't really speak for Vic, but I think he didn't do the dissertation, but certainly, I think if you were to read the book, and obviously you have, it was a textbook for Dave and I years ago, Teaching Children the Vic Braden Way. And no, I think that certainly would be covered in that book. I think that if someone if Vic were alive today, and it's just amazing to me that Vic, I was given his jacket. I've never worn it, but I was given his jacket. It's the USTA Sports Science, and Mike McLaughlin sent it to me, and he came to visit this past summer and brought some other Vic Braden artifacts. I mean, I have so many books that have been sent to me from his library, but that he was really disappointed that they didn't keep him on the science committee. And Vic, certainly, if you knew him, he's so funny, but a little bit of dark humor. I remember Vic saying to me about some of the meetings that he was in, that he wasn't running, and he wasn't really happy with the direction of the meetings. He said, now the one positive, and now I know what it's like in hell. And he's still ahead of his time. If people were to do the work, they had a reunion for him out in California. Unfortunately, I couldn't go, and I had kids here visiting. But one of the questions Joel Trucker asked is, what do you think of Vic Braden's comment, Tennis in the Stone Ages? And Frank Giampaolo, his answer was, I think people have really improved. Now it's more about the mental side of the game. I mean, it's on film. I have a copy of it. So I think Vic would have rolled over his grave, and hearing that'd be my take on that. And certainly many of our oldie goldie Bradenites is that Vic would tell you that tennis is still in the Stone Ages. He would tell you that center is great, but let's just look at his backhand volley. And if center had to go out and play this way, say center, you have to serve and volley. You're not staying back. You're just going to serve and volley. How would he do? And years ago, and one thing about Joel Trucker, he knows that Vic had such an education, besides in the classroom, but he ran the tour for Jack Kramer. And, people know the barnstorming days that sometimes those guys were playing on the slickest of slick for surfaces. I mean, whether they're playing on wood or they're rolling down, a thin mat on ice. So, yeah, I think that, we could ask you, like say when you were in New Mexico as a player, and I saw this in reading about you preparing for this podcast, is that you guys had to rough it. You guys didn't have a very big budget. And, I think that Vic would, he wasn't so comfortable delivering the message, but he certainly understood tough love. What Vic would do is if a kid wasn't behaving well, is that, he just had the sign where, thumb, you're getting kicked out, just like an umpire calls you out, you're out. And, but you can come back tomorrow. And you come back tomorrow, just like a 2-minute penalty, just tell you this is why you got kicked out. But, yeah, I mean, I really think that, and the people that work for Vic the man, not Vic the resource. That's one thing that, like Mike McLaughlin and I talk about is a lot of us are, in our 70s now. So that's where we think of it as a lost treasure. Certainly his books are there, and that's open domain. But
he was so far ahead of his time. Hey, I wanted to ask you guys both. I think the guy that kind of carried the torch a little bit with the video and the slow motion, Johnny Yandel. I heard he passed away.
Yeah,
really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. And I wanted to know what you guys thought about what he. I thought some of his stuff was really, really good. It's fact based. It just shows you that, and it shows you what your eye can't see. What you talked about earlier. What did you guys think of John Yandel? And did you use any of his stuff?
Yeah, I heard that news as well. That was sad. I think he was 64.
Was that recent?
He might even at this age. Yeah, it's very recent.
Like
yeah.
Like maybe a week ago or something. I don't know what happened.
I didn't either. I got online to try because a friend of mine told me, and I couldn't find out exactly what the cause of death was. But John Yandel at tennisplayer.net. I was a subscriber because I like the slow motion footage more than anything, and it's been around a long time. And when you were asking, I have one time I was with John Yandel, and it was at the high performance coaches something for the USTA, and it was when the world championships were held in Houston, and we met in a room, and Yandel was one of the people that was presenting. And prior to Yandel, Luis Madero, to tie in your question about the Spanish, he was a big man with the Spanish Federation through the USPTR, and he got up, and the Spaniards were right on the horizon of they were making the splash. But it was when Federer had his man bun still, and the Madero was up there, and he was talking about the wrists and this, and the eyes and the hands, and he said some things that really weren't factual, that were just not capable of being done because the ball's on the strings such a short amount of time. And Madero did his presentation and sat down, and then Yandel broke out his with all of the slow motion footage and just dispelled all of the myths that Madero had just spoke about. And so I'll never forget that moment, because as Yandel was going through this, I looked around, and I remember Madero, talking to the people next to him, explaining what you could just see it. He was explaining what he meant to say. And, and it was a comical moment, but I got to spend a whole weekend with Yandel there, and we had some common ground. And, sad to see him go, but he had a vision for sure.
First project that certainly was national notoriety is he had a rock and roll McEnroe Lendl video. It was on VHS, but early on, and again, tennisplayer.net, nonprofit, and it's so great to go back and look at all the old players on film, and if people do that, and then they really are diligent, they can realize that fundamentals do stand the test of time. He was with his newsletter. He's a big fan of Welby Van Horn. Spent a lot of times. That's obviously one of our mentors. But early on, I remember being at Coda de Casa, and he was showing up, and Vic was helping him out. A lot of people wouldn't know that. Vic helped a lot of people out. And so it's sad to hear 64 is young.
Hey, so Johnny, new era of the slow-mo and all the stuff, that the guy that kind of carried the torch that way for Vic, what new information did he have that maybe Vic didn't have or wasn't aware of? Was there anything that you saw that was kind of a revelation? Oh yeah, this is, did anything come up that you hadn't seen before from Vic?
I think it would be just the opposite. A lot of people don't realize that Vic worked with Gideon Ariel, and again, physics is physics. And no, I think that certainly Yandel's newsletter, I would say, would be more like a magazine, which is great. Just like years ago in the tennis magazines, World Tennis Magazine, they were the size of a small phone book. Now, young kids today won't even know what a phone book is. But you could get a tennis magazine and there could be an article in the front, an article in the back that contradict one another. But I think, it is great coming back to, like, say, with Bruce Lipka, that you can learn. There's so many chapters. There's so many variables. There's so much to learn to, like Welby used to always ask, how do you develop a tennis mind? So, no, I think that he provided a great service. But no, I don't think that, to me, even like, say, with PlayStation, a little more advanced PlayStation, but that's gone away. Basically, it's not that popular anymore. But that apparatus or that technology, from the Israeli military, it didn't do grip swing body, and really, right, still comes down to what's that racket head doing. I think if people went back and listened to, I was very fortunate when we did a podcast with Gideon Arrow, who sent me several books, and Stanley Plaganoff was looked upon as like being the godfather of biomechanics, and people were telling him to come over the ball. So he actually did this is how you could generate the most racketed speed. But see, then Vic came in and Vic said, the ball's got to go in. And it's like I was spoon-fed with Jack Groppel, who, he was a biomechanist, just like, say, with Mark Kovacs. I mean, they're all great for tennis. And then people think we're just into hero worship. Is ready play. The umpire is going to say ready play, but no, I think it's just the opposite. That Yandel provided a great service, a great contributor to tennis, but he did his thing, and it was a great service for people to read about tennis, but also look at all the films that he assembled. But no, I would say it would be the opposite way. That there had the breakthroughs. Like, say, for example, people say, well, is there anything that you disagreed with Vic? Is that, like, say, Agassi, when he was pre-stretching on the forehand side, he'd raise his elbow, or even like Pete, Vic would say, well, the pros to keep the racket on the same side of their body, and, they're not violating physical laws. But then Vic would say, well, would you teach that? And that's where we really struggle is, I would do all these traveling clinics with Vic, and early on, I would be the one who was in the video room, and he'd be the one that was on the court. But as he got older, I would be the one on the court, and he'd be in the video room. He's teaching. He was taught tennis in his 80s, and the pre-stretch on the Agassi forehand is that if way Vic would answer that, said like well, Gilbert said that Agassi's backhand is a gift from God. And then Vic has a film of, he asked Andre, because he met Andre when he was like 8 years old. So he asked Andre, it's a great segment. He said, Andre, why didn't you come to the net? You get people so far out of the court. Like, I saw Andre at 36. He was hitting through Nadal, but he couldn't come in. So the legs wear out, and Nadal wins. So the question was, Vic said, why don't you come in? And Andre said, have you seen me volley? And so, I think that's where, again, Groppel was great for the game, and he was a guest on our podcast, and a lot of time he came out and helped us with our program. David was there, our program for tennis teachers. But Vic, even though he was not formally a PhD, a biomechanist, he was a self-made biomechanist. But he knew the game. And then what happened is Vic was so misinterpreted. He was a short, fat, funny guy. He was Uncle Vic. And he was on Hollywood Squares. He was on the Johnny Carson show. He was on Mike Douglas. And he was bigger than big. I mean, but I've always said that there should be a book written, Vic Braden, how's it go? Vic Braden will be missed, and Vic Braden was missed. There's a lot of people that think they really had a handle on what Braden did. But I mean, I could be in a conversation with someone for just a few minutes, and I have a pretty good handle. Let's go with, like, say, Craig Tiley. That's where he had a leg up on you. When you started competing against Tiley at Illinois, and granted, he wasn't married. He's worked. Remember Bobby Bayless saying that, didn't finish that thought on our last podcast last week, is that Tiley could work around the clock. He worked with us. Certainly he had the principles from his family and such, but he was putting 24-hour days. Anderson could tell you he was there, but Tiley, and he had those guys believing they're the greatest at this and greatest at that. I mean, I could go on and on, but that's one thing I would say, that just like when you were playing against your teams were playing against Tiley had some, and he never had worked for Braden. He had gone and traveled and maybe done a week here. I mean, I have a record of a week here and a week there, but he had a really good handle on Braden information.
Yeah, I got a question for you. I was kind of curious about. I do think the players are better now today. It's equipment, it's technology, all this, but also, in our era, the best way to get in shape to play tennis was to play tennis. And there wasn't all this time in the gym. So now developing an elite level player, let's say you're a really good junior, a top American junior, or a top college player, how much time on the court do you spend as opposed to how much time in the gym do you need to spend? I only played tennis, and I never once felt like I lost a match because I ran out of gas. Never went to the gym. I hated the gym. Loved tennis, hated the gym. And I always felt like I didn't lose because I was in bad shape. I just lost because I wasn't good enough.
Go ahead, David.
Well, yeah, that's something we talk about all the time, Dave. And, referencing Dave Severson, who I have a lot of respect for. He went from kind of a good tennis player on the senior circuit, and all of a sudden he started winning, gold ball after gold ball, and he just became the man to beat in America and one in the world, one of the best in the world. And people would ask him how he cross-trained, and he said, for tennis. And he said, I cross-trained for tennis with tennis. And I mean, I never saw the guy give up on a ball. And he started becoming a lot more religious with stretching, et cetera. But for the most part, he did body weight exercises, just 20, 30 minutes. But he never gave up on a ball. And when he was hitting with players under his level, sometimes he'd come over and hit with the academy kids. He'd tell them that no ball they hit is out. So, the kids would get frustrated. But so I think with the weight training, the flexibility training, we have trainers work with our kids, but I kind of like the attitude of giving everything you have off the court. Your body can only take so much pounding. But if you're only giving 50% on the court, and then you're giving 50% in the weight room, and then you're going to a speed, agility, quickness expert, and you're giving 50%, I think you got to give everything to something first. And then see where that takes you. If I could go back in time already at this stage of my life, I would probably have embarked on a more rigorous flexibility program through my life and just stuck with it. I would have got into yoga early or something like that for the mind and the body, and just stuck with it from a very young age.
I agree. I agree with Dave. I think that stretching is really important. I never stretched either. I just didn't do it. But and I know these guys now, they say for development of a player, when you first start off the beginner, you should spend 99% of your time and on the tennis court, 1% in the gym. And then the better you get, the more those ratios start switching the other way. And if you're at the pro level, for every hour you're on the court, you're in the gym at least twice that, doing a physio, doing a stretch, doing a cool down, doing, some weights or band work or something like that. And I don't know if those percentages are true. You guys would know better than me. Well, is that true? The better you get, the more time you're actually doing other things besides tennis.
Well, I think that, we tell kids you need to be a myelin farmer. And, that's the new word for habit. And a lot of kids we meet have bad myelin with, the times have changed. I went off to play college hockey, and before I went in the fall, scheduled to meet the coach, and it was in April, and hockey season was over, and it's one of my greatest accomplishments as an 18-year-old. I completed the Bridge Street Run. It was the same day as the Boston Marathon, and the hockey players, you had to have a beer at 26 places. So I say that my brother was the assistant coach of the New York Rangers, and I was lucky enough to go when the Masters at the end of the year is being played in Madison Square Garden. those guys on the Rangers, they'd have a skate, say it from 11 to 1. And they'd go to lunch after they showered. They'd get to a restaurant at 1:45, and they were leaving at 1:45. Now the married guys would go home. So in that sense, the players became tougher. But I always go with hockey, and I know you're saying that the players are better. I think the NHL. I mean, everybody has a great skill set. Everybody can just fly. The skating. My older brothers didn't have video. I had a little bit. My older brothers didn't work with figure skaters. I had a little bit. So that's in my own life. So with tennis, I look at tennis and going, players aren't complete. I mean, look at the guy with a great serve from Australia.
Kyrgios.
Yeah. So Kyrgios. And fair enough. I mean, I'd love to listen to the guy. I think he's great for the game, entertaining. He brings back a little bit of the on edge from the 70s. So I'm not anti-Kyrgios, but I heard Kyrgios on a podcast during COVID. The person interviewing said, "Well, you're working on your net game. Are you gonna come back a serve and volley? You got such a great serve." And I think he's kind of dumbfounded the way he answered. He goes, "No, I can serve, I can volley," and the calculation that he has. And he's very, very good. He's got wins. I think he has a win over all the big three: Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic. But when you serve that way, and I understand that he finally is telling people that he's not going to play in the NBA. He's a very, very good basketball player. That's what he does for fitness. And, but yeah, I just think, okay, get the measuring stick out. Let's calculate it's not that it's wrong. That's where I like to listen to Medvedev. He's 6'6", and the way he serves first and second serve. I think his tennis is fading a little bit. You got to love Medvedev. Junior should listen to him on interviews, but he'll just tell you my volleys are terrible, but I'm getting better. But if you looked at how he were to volley, so I think what happens way too much is we talk about the top players in the game, and they're all going to have their own idiosyncrasies. They're not going to violate physical laws, but I think it's about having more kids stay with tennis, not have kids leave tennis. I think also the capitalism in this country, where money is young kids should be playing a number of different sports. And if the coaches, sports too structured. I was spending some time in Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta doesn't produce very much for how structured tennis is in that town with the Alta leagues and what have you. That, by one of the problems that we have with what we've put together, it's a system of systems, it's homework, is really a kid should have their game down by the time they're 9. Then they should just have to not modify, but they should have to say in a pie graph, we're going to do 7.5, 15% of your practice is going to just be doing slow technical work. And but again, college tennis, how many players in 37 years were even close to being complete that you recruited?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's interesting you mentioned Kyrgios. To me, people always talk about how good would the guy be if he gets some NBA point guard in playing tennis? That level. That's what an NBA point guard is. That's Kyrgios. That's Gael Monfils. That's how good you are. Those are NBA point guard athletic ability.
John Stockton, I think everybody should read his book and how tough his brother was on him and this and that. Will Chamberlain, before he passed away, he said, okay, put together the greatest basketball team, the best top 5 players. Who would you pick? And he said John Stockton was his first pick. And I don't know basketball. But with basketball players are not going to have an attitude. And the coach says, okay, let's get the balls out. Let's dribble in outside of these cones. Let's dribble backwards. Of course, the basketball kids are going to be, okay, can we scrimmage, coach? Can we scrimmage, coach? And they are regulated by their target. But tennis is just it's just so different. I think people think they're the artists and they just kind of hold their thumb up and go, okay, this is a way for you. And granted, people will put words in our mouth, but that's yourself being a college coach. That's more of a challenge. Okay, I'm going to work within this guy's game. Kid comes in, he's 18 years old. He's struggling in accounting. It's going to be tough for him to do the lab sciences. He can't put the extra time in. And, then as a college coach, you look at a lot of times, well, this kid we're going to let him just play the way he plays and he's going to win for us at 6. When you're coaching kids up to the, say the junior levels, even, maybe they sign to go off to college, you should be working with their whole game. And that's where I think it's wrong, where academies are recruiting people, even at the local grassroots level. Guaranteed Dave's in Dallas, Fort Worth. That's like a country unto itself. You go out to the weekend tournaments. I mean, there's guys out there, the Macho Male Ego, they're the third base coach. They're handing out business cards. They want to coach the kid who can already play. And that's why, we're trying to really help people with, hey, you need your kid to get a great base. You can practice in front of the mirror. The accessibility and affordability. If people took a deep dive, I mean, we have people contact us who we've never met them, but they're in this country, other countries, and their kids are progressing, but they have to go back and read the books we recommend or go back and watch all the tapes. And that's a work ethic to do that.
I tell you what I respect that you and Dave do a lot is I failed at this and I should be better at it, but I don't know what your weakness as a coach is, but I had some guys that came in and they didn't have a great forehand. It was really a messed up forehand. And for me to try and change that forehand, I was really unsuccessful at it. To really make a major change and just give them a fundamentally solid forehand. And I think the environment that you're in at college with people playing competitive matches and year round and you're playing challenge matches, and to really make a significant change, it's exactly what you guys do and what you suggested earlier. Take a red shirt here. You're just going to work on this because whatever I did, I know how to hit it. I know the mechanics. I know how to do it. I just didn't know how to teach it within the college atmosphere. And what you guys do is I think is the only way to do it. You can't make a grip change and you can't make a swing pattern change when the guy's got a challenge match next day.
No.
And it was really, really hard. And so that's why I believe as a college coach, you got to find that squirrel. That can run up the tree. You got to find pretty much a ready-made player without any really bad fundamental weaknesses. That's what you're looking for.
Well, you're 37 years. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you were going alone and didn't have any assistants at times, but now you have 3 paid coaches at the top level. How I would do that is I would have one coach stay at home. I wouldn't have the number. Okay, I've got to take 7, 8 guys, but if I'm going to carry 12, whatever all the legalities, the rules and regulations. But having the kid be cheering on the sidelines, and I know a lot of coaches. Somebody who you've known for a long time, he was a junior, Brian Boland. I know that his team they play and they'd come in and beat a team like NC State. Straight across the board, they win all the matches, and the NC State kids would go home, and the University of Virginia would say at NC State in practice, and like, don't you get it? I mean, but go ahead, Dave Anderson.
You have to have a little bit of salesmanship quality, but it's everything in life is timing. I think what Steve said about better, meeting the right coach at the right time and having the right coaches at the right time of life. And, there's times where, people need more of a football coach than a tennis coach in tennis. But the one thing about change is we're in such an interesting world. I try to just use the word improvement. And I've substituted that word in for change because the human brain, the connotation of the word change, people get panicky right out of the gate. And, so, hey, we're going to improve your forehand. Because the one thing, Dave, you mentioned earlier about some of the, the naysayers or some of the critical feedback, I guess you could say, is that, even people in our program, when parents are asked at a local tournament by another kid and they, our parents will respond, well, they're going to change your game. And, but it's really just about improvement. But I think that what happens is people have trouble seeing the future a little bit about what's ahead of them. And then if you can get them to see the future a little bit through humility or through education, whatever it is, they'll have a great willingness to make the adjustments. But timing is everything. I mean, when Murray, hired Lendl at one phase of his life, I don't think Murray would have listened to anybody. And then I think later in his career, he would have been much more receptive to whatever Lendl was trying to tell him. But, college coaching stuff, you have say a classic 48 months of trying to adjust and mold a 18-year-old who's already knee deep in their habits. And, they're also, trying to find themselves away from the parents and a new part of life. And I think you got to be willing to. I mean, I just remember from my own personal standpoint when I met Steve, and I just knew instantly. I mean, there wasn't really a lot of debating in my mind. I was like, okay, this is a better way to do it, and it just made sense. And I was like, let's do it. And there was a period where I was definitely locked up and unable to maybe navigate a court like I could 4 or 5 years later, but the payoff was very big. And it's no different than, I mean, whose parents don't tell them to put $100 a month in savings starting at age 18 or 22, and you'll be a millionaire down the road, and yet nobody does it. And we just can't see that far in front of us unless we're humble enough to listen to the wisdom from somebody who's been down the road.
I think one thing with time, is a coach going to be allowed time and then just to be a student of time? When you're a college coach, and obviously you did that for so many years, New Mexico, Minnesota, Cornell, Penn, and your kid's got to go off and he's got to go see a professor, he's got to write a paper, he's got to test. Now the landscape has changed where kids are actually, homeschooling, non-traditional scheduling. You could be working with a kid twice a day. And I think that the productivity is very, very low for these kids that are going to practice twice a day, maybe doing fitness. Obviously it's a big question. Are they getting their schoolwork done? But skill acquisition. To repeat it, I asked David to repeat it last week twice and say it on this podcast. His right-hand man, you mentioned him already, Andres. Players will go to Dave's place. Parents are there. Kids are there. He goes, okay, they have better players. That's why kids go to academies. We're going to academy. We're leaving home. It's a fact that in the Midwest, for example, people have left the Midwest to go to Florida. The Midwest was producing more players before the advent of the academy. So I think it's really time. A young coach spent a lot of time with us. Now he's from Idaho, and he's a head coach at the University of Idaho. Maybe he hears this. I should email him saying, hey, I said this on the podcast. If I had a support system, it's like Raleigh Grossbaum at the 3-hour mark of podcast number 239, your name was brought up. Listen to it. Is that he mentioned to me, he goes, well, and he did spend a lot of time, very dedicated. I made all these videos, and we make videos, and he's making the videos and he's writing notes while I make the video. So I have people that get on an airplane, they rent a car, they check into a hotel, and we make a video. They go home and they don't even send notes. But so Raleigh did that for some time, and there's two sides to it. He said, well, I think I need to move on to other things. 100%. Again, it could be Angela Duckworth has been mentioned, Bruce Lipka, Greg O'Shaughnessy. Definitely move on and go on to other things. But you have to keep going back to the well to be a master. And, people say, well, gee, Steve, with the results, Braden's no longer alive. But it's like, no, you have to listen to him over and over and over again. And, maybe through these podcasts, we do have some people that they've said they've listened to every podcast. And we say, okay, tennis treasure chest, here's a nugget. And, say, for example, Roger Federer says people will go to the net because they fear the low backhand volley. Well, do people even know the grips? Nadal, on his backhand volley, he has a composite grip. He has very close to a forehand grip. Well, then kids look at the Nadal and go, well, Nadal can do it, I can do it. And go, no, wait a minute. Uncle Tony, the whole family, the World Cup soccer, the red clay, the mentality is no. you do have to go with science and logic. And then what kids will do is they'll put their ego first and say, well, if Rafa, and there's a positive to that. Well, if Rafa can do it, I can do it. Well, I would not turn down, if somebody can give you the scientific rationale and they give you the logic. Now, granted, someone is 18 years old and they've already signed a scholarship. And it's like, well, okay, but you're telling us that you want to play pro tennis. Get better, just get better. And then it's really mind over matter. And then, but how many people are really going to work like you need to make a change in your game?
One of the most impressive marketing things I think that you do, or a coach like me can watch and say, these guys really know what they're doing, is I like the tapes that you show of, this is his forehand before, and this is the after, like 3 months. And the changes are really, really significant. And that always gets me to thinking that, you know what, these guys know how to teach tennis. Because I do that, and I try that, and I've been at the country club level and everything like this, and I've been at the college level forever. And those things are a great testament to what you guys do and do well.
Yeah. Thank you. But one thing, like, you were at Cornell. I've talked to you about Ned Harkness. I grew up hating Cornell because they were so good. Harkness, he won national titles in lacrosse and hockey at RPI, and then at Cornell. Yeah. And 1970, I was fortunate. One of my older brothers, he takes me. He'd been on the Clarkson team. I go to the NCAAs. My job, the morning of the finals, was to put ice in the bathtubs, put beer in the bathtubs. And one of the guys, hey, what are you doing? I was like 15, 16 years old. And I said, well, I'm just filling the bathtub. They love me. These guys were drinking beer on the day of the NCAA finals. And that doesn't happen now. And the Cornell guys, what Ned Harkness would do is that Cornell, they bought an old nursing home out on Cayuga Lake. And the weekends, they stayed together. They were in a bunkhouse out on Cayuga Lake. They weren't in the Ithaca bars. So I think the story behind the story, I love the backstory. I mean, people come to us, the tennis part's easy. What's tough is the character, is getting people to work. And I think Dave said it so well, is that just keep improving. Just keep improving. And the 60 seconds will write that out, is that, like every step up the mountain is beautiful. It's not like, well, I just have to get to the top and, enjoy the scenery on the way. And there is something to be said, okay, just put my head down and keep going one step. But improvement takes place in stages, and it doesn't happen overnight. And if you could be the commissioner of tennis for the day, I know that's asked by many people. Ask Dave Anderson this: if you're the commissioner for the day to improve tennis in the US of A or around the world, what would you do?
Well, since I come from the college scene, what I would do is I would tell any international kid at all, you're welcome to come, but we're not going to give you NIL. We're not going to give you a full ride. And I would take all that money and I would make it an American sport. I would just say, if you want a scholarship, you give the scholarships to American kids. You will probably know the percentages better than me, but I'm guessing 75% of the players in the country that are in that top 100 aren't Americans. I just think, especially at the Division I level. So, and I think that would sure give kids a pathway and give them a much easier chance to realize, hey, I can get my dream. I can go play. I can go and I can get a scholarship and pay for school. And I think I would do that.
No, that's a great idea. How about you, Dave Anderson?
Well, I agree with that particular part of it. And then I'm just a lifelong diehard of doubles. So I would find ways to, beat on the chest and breathe into the mouth of doubles to rebuild it. And that would be a multifaceted effort that would have to be aimed, number one, at the tennis coaches and teachers that are working with the youth in tennis to, develop skill sets, develop creative teaching that gets doubles played the way that doubles really used to be played, the way Bob and Mike Bryan played it. And then I think it would take, a strong redesigning of the current junior system for sure, and in regard to bringing it back to prominence. But between that and I think what Coach Geatz said about the college, which was, Wayne Bryan was a huge believer in what you just said, Coach, and I think that those two things would be at the very forefront. But there would be a long list, but I know those two come to my mind.
I got a quick question for you. So Ty Tucker, that guy, I believe, is one of the top 5 college coaches of all time. To take a program where he took it from to be as good as they are year in and year out and year in and year out, that guy's done a phenomenal job. He has a system of doubles which isn't anything like what you teach. And so how is your kid able to reconcile that? Is he playing Steve Smith doubles, or is he playing Ty Tucker doubles? He's going to go play for Ty. And Ty demands you play within his little system and his schematics for doubles. But that's not how he was taught and grew up. How did that work out?
Well, with Tucker, let me say this about, just go back one point. Love to talk about Ty Tucker. Talks about all day. I have so much respect for what he does, what he's accomplished. And then I want to also talk to you about camps. But for 10 years, I was in charge of a junior college women's team. And the rule was you could only have 2 foreign players. Very much like it's done in club tennis in, say, Germany. But the spirit of the rule was broken. I think it's fantastic to have the international players come over. Where would tennis be without all the international players that have come over and all the international coaches? But we as Americans, we have to do a better job. But can you imagine if the rule was such? I was one time, Claire Pollar's done so well at Northwestern, and it was a round table, and it was just a discussion like this. So, well, how would you improve tennis? And I said, well, if, say, for example, you're coaching, I'm sitting in Virginia, and I think last week the women's team was number 1. Now they're number 2, but the men's team has been way up there. And that young kid from Brazil, Fonseca, selfishly, I'm disappointed. I was planning on watching him play this spring, but can you imagine if you have to have a player from Virginia? If say Steve Denton, Dave's sitting in Texas, Steve Denton or Bruce Burke at Texas A&M, respectfully, if they had to have, and I say, well, you could even do this where the 17 different sections would be, I think it'd be great if the sections were competing against one another. If somebody wanted to begin this conversation, if someone was in North Dakota and they had someone like a young David Geatz and someone like a young David Anderson, and there was the trust, and it's like, this is where we are. We're going to blossom, and we're going to play big-time tennis. And if people had a little bit of a clue, they go, that's happening in the world anyway. There's people that are coming from places like North Dakota where they have lousy weather, lousy conditions. Players come from everywhere. And but I think you said it so well, David, to try to market, especially an American kid, hey, we're going to go to, Grand Forks. It's 22 below zero. We're going up there to train. But it's the small pockets. Daniel Kroll did that, covered that so well in his book, the Talent Code. Like, say for Tucker, come to Ty Tucker. I love your thing with opportunity, ability, and desire. And my son Connor right now, your son gets married. You're like, well, this is great. The person reading the vows says, every step of your life you end up marrying this person. They're happily married, and you wish the best, and this is great, great, great. But Yvonne was doing this, that, and the other thing, and he put all these photos out. And there's a photo of my 2 sons with Austin Krajicek. Austin Krajicek came to Desire. He had a 10. With opportunity, his parents, Rob and Sherry, I've known him since he was 7 years old. His opportunity was a 10. Now the USTA didn't give him the attention he needed and this and that. But, by 13, he was down at Bolletari's and, and his ability in doubles. I was very flattered with Rob Krajicek in Austin. He wins Kalamazoo. They take me to the U.S. Open. When he was looking for a scholarship, everybody wanted him. I was in any coach who came to meet, they met with the parents, they met in my office. And, so with, Steve Denton hired us hired me when he came off the tour. And how he hired me is that he had hired some people that I trained to teach tennis, and they were, somebody did a lot of things with David. Pin-up ball would just go, Steve, that's wrong. This little girl who's, 5'2" or whatever. So there's always a story behind the story. I think with Tucker, I'm certainly not braggadocious, but, I remember Tucker telling me my son was the best doubles player in the country. And my son was on a team with Chase Buchanan and Blas Rolla. I know those guys' games really well. I mean, with Chase, I remember Ty having me work with his serve, and I go, well, can we film it? Then because you wanted him to know, have him be the independent thinker, problem solver. Those guys won 3 doubles titles, but Ty is a smart guy. He's sly like a fox. He's going to have his doubles teams ripping forehands at those weak backhand volleys, and no, very unconventional, but, to have someone be able to serve and volley. For example, a kid really, I'm really disappointed with watching Division III men's tennis doubles because they use I formation every time. I mean, every time. And it's like, geez, guys. But okay, they're in college and okay, fair enough. But when a kid is a junior coming up, they shouldn't play formations. It's like, no, serve and volley, practice, serve and volley. We do drills, serve, return cross court, no poaching. Can you serve and volley? And what would be done in other sports, they would do it exactly like that. Basketball's gone away from that. The old oldie-goldie basketball coaches are, that's where, like a late Bobby Knight, I don't like to watch the NBA. It's, and it certainly changes. So this is another topic, but no, I respect Tucker with the work ethic, the competitiveness. My son went there at first, like everyone's like, oh boy, I don't know if I like this, but people like winning. And I think Ty, the way he talks to people and, but again, I would look at it and go, because I was at pro tournament a couple months ago and Blas Rolla was there. And, I think we need to go back and have the rules be when you're a freshman, you don't play. You don't play. You go there for a developmental year. But most college coaches are, Ty's not that way. Ty wants those guys there, as many minutes as they possibly can be, summertime as well. But how many coaches Coach Geatz are in college tennis? I mean, they're selling their soul to development. They're saying, you can come in January and they just put you right in the lineup. There's no development. It's just shop and bop. I mean, okay. And, parents are shocked when I say, they're very top schools. They're, for the most part, they're looking at kids that are already playing pro tennis. Kids go to Kalamazoo and they're so nervous. And, a lot of the very top coaches, they know who the top kids are there because they're going to go because the winner gets American, obviously gets a chance to play in the U.S. Open. But no, my son, at one time he was told to stand behind the server and he said, no way am I going to do that. And so he did hold his ground a little bit. And, he loves Tucker. And, but Tucker's, with, Cobalt and he played doubles with, will be friends for life. And, for me, that was something that was covered when Ty was on my side. When Cobalt, who got to be ranked 1 in the NCAAs, he was coming out of college tennis, we had someone who was going to fund him. And we said, no, take 6 months off, and then we're going to send you to France to play amateur tournaments, no ATP points. And it was really choosing between David Geatz's approach and my approach. And certainly the person who was in my corner, somebody I taught to teach tennis, got in the business and said to Cobalt, this has been probably said before on the podcast, if you want Cheerios and Smith tells you to eat cornflakes, you're going to eat cornflakes. But that doesn't happen. How many times does a tennis parent say the coach is in charge? Let me turn it over to David. On the average, what percent are you the coach now? And you could probably even give us a number. Well, that kid, I'm at 92%. That kid, 48%. Are they just totally in? We ask kids all the time, are you a 1 or are you a 2? I'm all in. You tell me what to do and I'm doing it. Dave Anderson, go ahead.
Well, I think it's a smaller number for sure. I think that it's interesting with COVID. I mean, changed it a little bit. I think people working from home, I think the world's become a little bit more like that. There's flexibility in how parents work and more involvement. And I think that, the involvement isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just, I always talk about the three-legged stool. It's just the player, the parent, and the coach, and everybody understanding the roles. And I think that the three-legged stool is different for everybody. Sometimes, more parental involvement is needed, but not necessarily interference. And I think that, I was just literally meeting with somebody this morning on it, and using that word interference. I said, this can be a lot quicker or a lot slower depending on the amount of interference we have. There's just a lot of games, there's a lot of journeys that are destroyed around the dinner table. I think it's sometimes done innocently, but when seeds of doubt are planted into the kid's mind in terms of how much they have to actually listen to the coach, and that the parents doubt a decision that was made here and there, I think it's a very negative thing. And, I'm not sitting here saying all coaches or myself or anyone doesn't deserve to be questioned, but when there's fundamental things that have to be addressed, whether it's with technique or character, work ethic, whatever it is, the more it gets questioned, the slower the process, and it seldom gets there, to be honest. But I think the number of peer situations, when you run into one, you almost kind of fall over because you're not accustomed to running into many of them anymore.
David Geatz, tell us about the mentoring program at Penn. I think that your answer will circle back and be an answer of what we're already talking about. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, I didn't really realize the advantages of going to an Ivy League school. I know the academics are great, and you've got great professors, and et cetera, but I always thought one of the biggest advantages we had at Penn, which we got going, was we had a mentoring program set up, and it's all on a computer. So when you come as a freshman, not as a freshman, but because you're kind of figuring out what you want to do, but by your sophomore year, you're given a mentor, and the mentor says his job is to just push you up on the stage. His job is to help you find opportunities. So let's say Dave Anderson is a business major. So we will hook him up with a tennis player who's maybe third or fourth up at Saks Goldman. Penn has a huge presence on Wall Street. And so that mentor is going to say, hey, Dave, why don't you come up to New York City? We'll go hit a few balls. Come on over to Saks. And I just want to show you around, show you some of the different departments, the buy side, the sell side, how we market our bonds, et cetera. And then you kind of get a feel for it, meet some of the guys, and just see what you think. And we'll go hit a few tennis balls afterwards. And so every 2 weeks, they have to record. The mentor writes down how the conversation went, what they talked about, just a couple lines or so, and so does a kid. And every 2 weeks, they're required to make contact with each other. And I realized the real benefit of this program was we had 100% job placement, whatever the kids wanted to do. And a lot of it was mentor-based. And to tell you how powerful the program was, we had a kid who great tennis player for us, but he was a tennis guy first and a student second. And he had a 2-point-something GPA, which is horrible in the Ivy League. And he never took one business class his whole time there. And he says to me his senior year, I want to work in finance. I want to be investment banking. Well, geez, you got a 2.2 GPA and you got no business classes. This is going to be tough. So his mentor hooked him up and got him hired. And I asked the guy afterwards, I said, well, how would you hire a guy with not great grades? And he goes, hey, he's a Penn guy. He's a smart guy. We'll teach him the rest. And I like him. He's a good kid. And that's what I'm here for. And so I realized, wow, this is really a big thing. When I went to college and I got out of school, nobody helped me with, with anything. You just go out and find your way on your own. Maybe they had some type of placement service. I didn't know what it was. But so they developed a real close relationship with these guys. And these guys are there to help. And they're going to push you up on the stage. And when it comes time to get a job, they're going to say, hey, I know this Dave Anderson kid. He's a good kid. I've been his mentor for 4 years. He's the kind of guy we need back. And they get hired. And I thought it was one of the greatest advantages of why you go to an Ivy League school that I didn't realize happened before.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the NIL? Not NIL, I'm sorry, the portal. So coach reprimands the player goes back to the dorm and lets the world know I want to transfer. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can't add anything more than anybody that listened to your last podcast with Chuck. I think Chuck answered that about as well as he could. Who likes that? Who likes the portal? There's no sense of loyalty and how much money can I get? And if it's not going well, I'm going to leave. I can just tell you when I went to school, and maybe when Dave played college tennis too, he could tell you the same. Man, I was so happy to play for University of New Mexico and represent my school and wear the Lobo colors. And I'm out in California for spring break, and I'm just going, wow, man, the school paid for my way to come out here. This is unbelievable. I get coaching, I get some rackets and string. I was just so happy to play. I would have paid money to play college coaching, to play college tennis. And I know that attitude doesn't exist anymore. I got out before the NIL money, but that's one of the first questions a kid will ask when I talk to my coaching buddies. Well, how much can you pay me? How much am I going to get? And I don't know. I don't think I would have had the balls to do that when I was a kid. I hate the transfer portal. I don't know if there's a coach in college tennis that could just tell you right now, I just love that transfer portal. God, it's made my life easy. Talk to the old football in Minnesota. He said recruiting's the toughest part of my job. And he goes, and now with this NIL, I got to recruit the kid every single year. The kid I recruited once, I got to recruit 4 more times. And so,
Dave, great input. Coach Geatz, I've heard you say this before. I think you were at the University of Minnesota when you said this, is that you figured out how much your players were being paid because of the worth, the net value of the scholarship, the opportunity. So the fitness trainers and the managers and the travel. Could we have parents listening to this? Could you just talk about that for a second? How you broke that down, put a dollar figure to it?
I didn't know you were going to ask about this, but I wish I did. One time somebody was complaining about something, and I said, God, you realize how much you honestly get paid? If you took the whole tennis team budget, which is devoted for tennis, and you divide it up amongst the 10 people on our team, and then you got to figure how much is that academic advisor getting? Divide that up about how many athletes you work, and how about the trainers? And how about all of your equipment? And what would that team travel cost you? What would the indoor courts cost you? What would the private lessons and coaching cost you that you get every day? How about the strength coach and the physio guy that you work with? How many athletes do they work with? And let's divide their salary up too. And plus that doesn't even include your scholarship. It was an astronomical amount. It's a couple $100,000 a year job is what it is. And I added up everything. Like I say, I just divided up how many athletes there were and how many athletes does that academic tutor work for. Figure that it's an incredible amount of money. If I would have got a little bit more prepared, I could have ran the numbers for you again, and you'd be surprised how much that scholarship is really worth when you think about it like that.
Coach Geatz, what about camps? Back in the day, I think that many coaches, their salaries were so small, they were actually with the camp, and many of the players didn't play in the summer. They taught the camp. Just elaborate upon camps. What are your thoughts on camps for a college coach or just in general?
Well, you know what? All it is when I was there was a way to supplement your income. And that's all it was. And I never know a college coach ever I talked to. God, I can't wait for camp to start. Really fired up about camp. Nobody. You just did it. It's kind of like you did it for the money that most of the college coaches did. And I'm not a good guy to comment about camps because I really didn't do them until my last couple of years at Penn. What I would do in the summers is I would work at country clubs because in Minnesota, country clubs, it's a 3-month season. and that's all the courts were open for. Well, that's when the kids were gone for vacation, for summer school, and for vacation you couldn't practice during that time. So I would work at really nice country clubs as a tennis director. And so that's how I made my extra money. And the school realized we don't pay you a lot of money. So even though you're on a 12-month contract, go ahead, you can do this. And so I didn't do camps at Minnesota. I didn't do camps at New Mexico. I ran private clubs in summer times.
Were you connected with exposure camps for kids trying to go and meet coaches?
I did the exposure camps with a guy named Tarek Merchant. And I did do those. And it started off as a recruiting camp. And it was great at first because I had numerous 5-star kids coming to my camp. They could be on campus. I could get a chance to work with them and see what they were all about. They could see what I was all about, what school was like, because they're living in the dorm. And I thought they were great. And then the focus kind of changed a little bit. None of the good kids came anymore. The good kids didn't come. And it was almost like I would feel guilty sometimes. These kids are coming to the Penn tennis camp because they want to play at Penn, but they're really at best a D3 player. And I felt like a little bit of a charlatan that I'm telling them, yeah, come to Penn and I'll take a look at your game, but it wasn't really realistic. So, but I did do those exposure camps.
With Coach Anderson, I would guess after 3 years, he was running 2 clubs in the next town over, but was always there helping us and part of every, extracurricular activity, coaches, or I should say, educators coming in to visit. But we had a 9-month orientation. Someone was going to be working in our camp. They were trained for 9 months. Coming back to Ty Tucker, he has a great idea. The USTA, if they were to fund players to play, and they say they're going to fund them for the first 2 years or first 3 years, and this is how much money, and they get to this level, and they'll continue to be supported, but then they have to give back to the game. I don't think a lot of people would do that, but it's just a fantastic idea to give to get. And I'm not explaining it as well as it's his idea, but that. So then college players, because all those years you coached college tennis and the people who wanted to go out and play, the name of the player, his first name's Harsh Mankin, Indian player.
Harsh Mankad.
Number 1 in college tennis, and he's given a lot back to the game with his tennis programs, and he's traveling back to India and trying to give back. The rap on international players too was like, you want somebody that's going to come back and give back to your college. And the American kids that went to school and had a good collegiate experience are 100 times more likely to give back to that program, support the program, than some kid that came over for Algeria. Is he going to donate money back to Ohio State? Probably not. But the American kids will. And so that's another reason for doing it with Americans.
Someone like Harsh, though, that went on and played. I remember watching him play. I think watched him play Jeremy Wurtson one time. Who funded him? Did the Indian Tennis Federation? Did his family?
No, God, you know what happened? It was a really sad story. No, you know what Harsh did? Harsh called me, and he's number 1 in the country, and we were good. We were 10 in the country that year. I said, you know what? We have one tiny little shot to win the NCAAs, and maybe it's this year when everything comes together for us. Harsh comes to me as senior. He says, I'm turning pro. And I said, why, Harsh? And he says, well, the Indian government said that they're going to give me everything. They'll pay for all 3 years. They're going to give me some money. They'll provide me all my coaching, all my equipment, travel, everything for 3 years. And because they think I can play on the Davis Cup team, and they're going to put their money into me, but I have to turn pro now. And I said, okay, Harsh, why don't I be your coach, and I'll give you all your equipment, and you can play all your college schedule. If you want to go play a future, I'll pay for that too. And you can stay here and get a degree, because he had a 3.95 in econ. He's a really smart kid. And you got 1 more year and you get your degree. So Harsh said, no, it's really important to me. I want to play for India, and they're going to step up and support me. So Harsh goes in place for 3 or 4 weeks. And then India says, you know what? He lost first or second round for the first 3 or 4 weeks. And India said, "Sorry, Harsh, we're going to drop you. We're going to go with arbitrage instead, and you're not doing well." And Harsh calls me to take, and I come back to school, and I said, "Well, not now. You turn pro, and I can't give you a scholarship. There's nothing I can do for you."
Wow.
So that happened with Harsh. So he just went out and played. I think he was around 200 in the world in doubles for a long time, and but it was kind of a sad story for me. We had one little shot to make a big run at the NCAAs, and that was the year.
Well, yeah, you became number one. No, in researching your background, obviously we've known you for a long time, but just going through that, read about him. I have one more question, and Dave, why don't you ask one? We'll wrap it up. All your years on college campuses, you must have met so many coaches from different sports, and how did that influence you? And I would start with Lou Holtz. Was Lou Holtz at Minnesota when you were there?
Missed him by a year.
Oh, I love that guy.
Yep, I would have really loved to known Lou. And you know what? Those big schools, you don't unless the football coach or basketball coach likes tennis and wants to come down and hit a few balls. It's not like you see those guys, all the time. They don't really become real great friends or anything.
Yeah.
So, but I would always talk to all the coaches. I went to the track coaches and I said, you know what, or swimming coaches, and I want to learn about peaking. And I thought, who knows how to peak an athlete for performance better than track coaches or swimming coaches? They always swim their best times at the biggest moments, the Olympics, the NCAAs, whatever. And so I would ask them for some secrets about how do you peak and what's my strategy for tennis. And so I use those guys as a resource, and I learned a lot of stuff about coaching from non-coaching people, from non-tennis people.
Yeah. With periodization, I know with junior development, certainly that doesn't apply like it would in college tennis. Of course, it has changed. I mean, it used to be where a kid would go to school from 8 to 3, do their extracurricular activities, do their homework, go to bed, rinse and repeat. But no, you certainly need to open yourself up to learnings from other sports.
I love my time at Penn because we had some of the smartest professors in the world in psychology. And I told you about positive psych and Angela Duckworth, who I got to meet. Angela Duckworth would write some of my recruits for me. She was really very helpful.
Wow.
And I learned a lot about coaching from people that weren't in the coaching field. So,
how about North Dakota? You have a name from the past you want to pull out of the hat, or you got another question? Ask him, do you know so-and-so?
Well, I've got a lot of names. I'm going to have to, Dave. We're going to have to follow up in the next week on another phone call just to talk about a few names. But,
our listeners, before we came on the air, these guys were like, boom, boom. They know everybody from the days gone by.
The tennis population in North Dakota is tiny, honestly.
Yeah.
And so if you're a good tennis player, I know you for sure.
There aren't many courts.
No,
there aren't many courts. But I would ask you this. What do you think of the Fighting Sioux doing away with their name? And do you have a original Fighting Sioux hockey jersey still?
Yeah, I've got a Fighting Sioux jersey. I've got a Fighting Sioux baseball cap. I've got it all. And
yeah.
my friends of my era hate it, but I think I would be politically incorrect now to say that. Oh yeah. They left it there. The political correctness, the wokeness today is just, I don't know. I guess I'm too old. I guess I'm not woke. I don't know.
Guys, 1967, I was in Syracuse, New York. They hosted the NCAA ice hockey championship, and Cornell won, and North Dakota, I remember the goalie, Mike Curran. That was like, so anyway, a gentleman offered me $100. And back then I was like, okay, Dad, this guy just offered me $100 for my ticket. And he said, this game's going to be worth so much to you. You'll be telling people your whole life, like I am right now, that I was at that hockey game. It was amazing. But yeah, that's the first time I saw North Dakota play.
Wasn't Ken driving the net for Cornell? Or was he before?
He wasn't on that 67 team. He was before that. I'm 99% sure, but I watched Dryden play. I had never seen a goalie shoot the puck like that. It was just amazing. But then years later, my brother, he was associate GM when Dryden was the GM and president of the Leafs. But yeah, I've read a lot of Dryden's books. My sister went to Cornell, and again, I hated Cornell, but one thing about Ken Dryden and his brother was a goalie in the NHL. But what the dad did in the backyard, he put up boards, but he put down asphalt. Now, I know that across the street, the Hewittsons, where I grew up, we had a baseball diamond in our backyard, and across the street, there was a hockey rink. But they could play ball hockey because the rink across the street from my parents' home when I was a kid, it was just dirt. But the Dryden brothers, it's amazing. They play basketball as well, and both big, tall guys, especially Ken. But that's the story. That's the myelin, that those guys were playing street hockey around the clock. And that's why, they were two goalies that faced each other and brothers in an NHL hockey game. But that's where I think also too, that's the, but by the time a kid gets to college, they're 18 years old. I mean, we say it all the time. Days are long and decades are short. So a kid's almost 20 years old by the time he goes to college. That's 2 decades. But Dryden is just brings back memories. I could talk to you about Cornell. I remember when you were there, I asked you going to hockey games? But it's been great.
I remember when I got the job at Cornell, Steve Smith called me up and said, "Do you know who the most important person on the whole Cornell campus is?" And I said, "I don't know, the president." He said, "No, the goalie on the hockey team."
Yeah. They were great. Lionel Rink, amazing. I saw a lot of games there. Played there as a kid against Ithaca teams. But Coach Geatz, this has been great.
Steve, I learn a little something, so I like that. I want to be a lifelong learner, and I learn a little bit of something, so it's good.
Yeah, we're flattered to hear that. But it's great now that you've connected with Dave, so you ND guys can connect and talk more tennis.
Dave, I want to run into you somewhere down the road here.
Definitely. Yeah, this has been fun. We'll catch up again.
Yeah, we've talked about having a coaches get together. We need to do that with all our associates and alumni. All right, guys.
All right.
Thanks so much. Tell your wife you love her.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right, good night.
Have a good night. Thank you.
David, thank you. David Geatz. I'm David, and whatever David wants, David Geatz. Another podcast in the books. Why don't you say one thing, Yvonne, and we'll sign it off. So many great comments made.
I'm going to repeat, I think, the best line from the podcast tonight, the one that Dave Anderson had said. Tennis, there's no point of arrival, only checkpoints. Every stage has its own beauty.
That's good. We got to write that out and put it on the bathroom wall. Listeners, thanks for hanging in there. We hope that people are getting some things out of this. How's it go? The Not So Great Tennis Podcast amateur hour when it comes down to me doing this. But Andy Fitzel, I'll never forget. Andy, going back to Germany. What about that podcast? When we should do that? Every week. And we're working towards 5 years. We're going to be better the next year, the second 5. That's how it goes. They're always better the second 5 years. Anyway, listeners, thank you. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, David Geatz. Thank you, David Anderson.
Thank you, Steve. Adios.